Welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, live from No Sale Studios on the Ace of the Tavern, Acefield Retro, and as always, joined on Father's Day by one half of the Tavern Daddies, Hawks Tavern's Daddies. Chad, what's up, dude?
Not a whole lot, man. I love episodes like this because we're previewing a show, we're reacting to a new show, and we have a big piece of news and some fun quick hitters. So it's always a good show when we're previewing something cool coming and talking about something cool that just happened. So I'm excited to get into the episode.
We're on the front door, the porch, if you will, of this amazing summer of wrestling we have, right on the precipice of, I mean, it could be historic, man. I think across all different promotions, you know, you look at everyone going international with whether it be Money in the Bank or we're in Canada for Forbidden Door, Impact doing their thing in Australia this summer, and New Japan Pro Wrestling is obviously all over the place, dude. It's what else could you say? I mean, we're going to talk about the big three topics, but want to lay it out there. Wrestling's in a very positive place.
Absolutely. Like you said, the Australian Impact Tour, we've got Forbidden Door. We're knocking on the door of this week. We have Money in the Bank coming. We have SummerSlam looming. We have All In, the biggest stadium show in AEW history. We have All Out a week after that, and all the fun stuff in between, all the weekly content. And we have this new show, Collision. So we have an extra 2 hours of wrestling every week from here on out. So, I mean, what's better? If you're a wrestling fan and you're bitching right now, I feel bad for you. This is good shit.
Yeah, exactly. And I was about to say the same thing. Stop and smell the roses for a second. Take in everything that's there. I know it gets overwhelming at times, and it's easy to feed the trolls on social media, on Instagram or Twitter or wherever you're getting your wrestling fandom out there. But yeah, just enjoy the ride, man. Because if you were a kid, if you know, close your eyes and pretend you were 11 years old and think about all the wrestling we have in front of us. I just think about waiting, clamoring for Monday nights, and that's all I was able to check out at the time. Now there's wrestling 7 days a week if you really want it.
Yeah, and I was thinking the other day, I saw a clip just before we get into the big stories. I saw a clip of Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton wrestling. I believe it was 94 or 95 on WCW Pro, which was like the equivalent of like WWE main event. And I'm thinking so many people today will cry and complain and bitch like, oh, these smaller shows, they're not good. Back then, it just made me remember, like, as a kid, I didn't think about stuff like that. I just, holy shit, there's an hour of pro wrestling on. Arn Anderson's facing beautiful Bobby. Let me check this out. There wasn't like, all these guys, they shouldn't be on this show, or there was no complaining. Like, in the eyes of a young fan, which is, I think, the years where you're grabbed as a fan. Like, if you love wrestling as a kid, chances are it's going to come in and out of your life for the rest of your life. You didn't care if it was WCW Saturday Night, or if it was Clash of the Champions, or if it was Nitro. If you're WWE fans, same thing. You didn't care if it was Velocity or Raw. Like, you were just happy, like, you're home, you can't drive yet, you can't hit the roads with your buddies and go see concerts. This is prior to all of that coming into your life. As a child, you're home, you want wrestling on your TV, and it's there. If I was 11 years old right now, living through what we're living through, I would be on cloud nine.
And the talent's in the best place it's ever been. I mean, on both sides, it's just a fantastic time to be a wrestling fan. So think about that, guys, when you're arguing. Specifically, if you're going to argue anywhere, make it in the Turnbuckle Tavern comments so we get all the love in the algorithm. So at Turnbuckle Tavern, make sure you follow us and post your thoughts. You hate Punk, you love Punk, you hate the Elite, you love the Elite. Put it in the Turnbuckle Tavern comments because it helps us get to the top and get us to 10,000 followers, dude. Come on.
Absolutely. Instagram at Turnbuckle Tavern. Go follow Acefield Retro. Go follow us at theturnbuckletavern.com. Apple, Spotify, YouTube. That's where we love the most. Give us any love. We appreciate it. And you're going to find some good conversations, some good wrestling fans. If you like getting in the comments, trolling it up, getting into arguments with fans, it's there for you. So
we don't feed the trolls, but you know what? Hang out there if you want.
Right. Exactly.
All right, let's get into big story number one.
Big stories. Story one.
With the beautiful vocals of Elton John leading us in, we have AEW Collision's debut on Saturday night. Man, we were talking about this prior to going on air, and we want to make sure we organize this because there's a lot to digest and a lot to chew on, matter of fact, because a lot to talk about. But let's start aesthetically with Collision's presentation. I'll pass it to you. Just initial thoughts on watching this, consuming it. We're now at this point less than 24 hours removed, so it's going to be a knee-jerk reaction. But what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I'll set the stage for you. I'm standing out in the yard. It's I believe it was like 7:56. I think they had Avengers Age of Ultron leading into the 8 p.m. slot. I'm talking to Cassie. We have this little house behind our main house that's kind of just like it's got my podcast studio in it. It's got a little kitchen. It's got a little movie room with a big TV. It's where I watch all my wrestling at. So I'm standing out of the door and I have the door open where I can look right in and see the big TV. And I see Thanos's glove pop up and I'm like, oh shit. And they get the next up on AEW Collision. Their AEW Collision starts now, the whole TNT thing. So I'm like, I told Cassie probably 3 minutes before that hit, I'm like, I'm not being rude, but as soon as I hear this, I got to run inside. I always love on a new show. I love to be locked in to see the new presentation we've never seen before. So I run in and the opening package kicks on. How cool, Elton John. Good choice, man. At first, when they said that song, I'm like, okay, I want to see how that song plays with the graphics. The new graphic package looked awesome. And when it kicks on, my biggest worry was like, I want this to look different than Dynamite. And boy, did it. I thought the stage was unique. I thought the graphics packages on the big Contron for Collision looked awesome. I noticed quickly that the ring ropes were red. Mm-hmm. It had just its own vibe. I even thought the show was a little brighter. I thought the crowd was lit up a little more, which kind of gave it a distinct difference from Dynamite. And then I hear the new voices. I hear Kevin Kelly. I hear Nigel McGuinness. I'm stoked. I thought out of the park, just basing it on look and feel and vibe and sound. When it comes to the commentators, I thought they did an excellent job separating this away from Dynamite, but at the same time, making it feel just as big and special as Dynamite.
Yeah, I think the presentation looked clean, and that's what they've been really doing since they've taken on a different approach and making Dynamite look more polished, and Collision is the beneficiary of that process. It looks so clean, as you mentioned. The lighting was different. Just even like the lower thirds underneath the guys was different as well. It's not the same. And SmackDown was the same way. 1999 when it debuted, it was so different than Raw, and it immediately set the stage where, yes, it's going to be the same guys. Stone Cold, Triple H, The Rock are all going to be on the same show, but it just looked different. So if you're seeing a highlight package, the blue ropes, the black ropes, you know that it's on SmackDown.
Right.
And the same thing with here Collision. It just looks different. So immediately as they got in here, I love the name brand songs. I love going out there and splurging for something like that, because now that comes up on you're at a barbecue. Elton John comes on Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. And you're like, now that's forever going to be Collision to me.
Such a great song to pick. Like on hindsight, I'm like, because, in the beginning, I'm thinking, I love Elton John. I have his greatest hits. I think he has banger songs top to bottom. But like, I'm thinking like, how is a early 70s song going to track with, new school graphics packages? Like, is it going to fill off? But it didn't. It felt great.
Yeah, it's just fantastic when they go out of their way to splurge. Like I said, even with theme songs, when they bought Tarzan Boy by Baltimore for Jungle Boy, or go down the list of what Tony Khan was able to Jane for
Jefferson
Orange Cassidy.
Starship.
Just so good, because it takes it to the next level where maybe it catches someone's ear, and then that song gets new life too. I know that song's never really gotten out of cycle, because if you listen to whatever oldie stations you listen to, that's one of Elton John's most popular songs among like 100. But it's awesome because it rejuvenates that song. And also, I love when wrestling lives elsewhere, where you can be listening to, by me, it's 103.1, which is like WBAB. It's an oldie station. Elton John pops on. And if that song ever comes on, no matter the history in my brain forever, it's always going to be the Collision. And you could say the same thing about wrestling theme songs. You know, like you mentioned, Jane by Jefferson Starship. That's forever going to be Orange Cassidy.
Yeah.
And the personality, no matter what you do, that's going to be CM Punk's song, even though it wasn't initially his song. It was written
Right.
live performance by that band. And I don't know. I love that. And I also, you mentioned the commentary team, Kevin Kelly, one of my favorite announcers. You guys are just being introduced to him. Strap in, enjoy this, because he is a guy who can set the stage, paint a picture vocally in a way that nobody else can. In a lot of ways, because he had to bat with a weighted bat in New Japan, trying to explain that to the American audiences and get the cultural differences for the Japanese wrestling to make sense. And to me, him and Nigel fit famously together. I thought it was such a good dynamic, and man, it was such a different thing than Excalibur and Tony Schiavone. It felt different in a good way.
I was so pumped because there was no, JR popped in for a minute. He had posted a picture. He had a really bad black eye and he had a fall, but he still made the show. He apologized, said he felt a little off, or if he sounded
like it was
funny.
a mic issue though. Like that's what I kept pulling. It felt like a staticky mic. We have it on here, JR. No worries, dude. It happens.
Yeah, and I thought it was nice to see that familiar voice, but at the same time, the thing that I really appreciated with the commentary was the fact that it wasn't throwing in one of the guys who are tried and true to Dynamite, not throwing in Taz, not throwing in Schiavone, not throwing in Excalibur. Like Kevin Kelly and Nigel crushed it. It gives it its own flavor, which I felt was vitally important to the show to differentiate it. And to be honest, like the thing about Kevin Kelly I love, he's cut his teeth recently in New Japan. So he has that pedigree of, hardcore wrestling, not just the casual WWE scene, but he's also tied in with WWE history. Like longtime fans will remember him back in the day. So he has a lot of equity with fans, I feel like. And I really enjoyed the commentary. And Nigel, man, has been low key one of my favorite commentators since he was with NXT. I thought he killed it in NXT and NXT UK. So when they announced, I want to say they didn't announce the commentary team fully until that morning, Saturday morning or Friday night.
I think it was Saturday morning. I saw it pop up. Someone shared a graphic. I'm not sure if it was in the, it was on news. It was on Wrestling Observer Radio that they announced it. And dude, I think that's where it became a graphic after.
Yeah. When it got announced, I was pumped. I was like, yes, this is what I want. I want something fresh. And it's not just going to help Collision. I think it's going to help Dynamite. Like now it's going to help those guys where they can really just focus on the Wednesday show. These guys can focus on Saturday, and it gives each team a way to kind of separate itself from the other team. And this isn't so much look, but I think it has to be said. I really think this show from top to bottom, from the look to the sound to the matches, I think we're going to get some healthy competition between these two brands. And I think it's going to be good for AEW to have a little internal competition, not so much competing with WWE and Impact and all those guys, but competing internally. I think is going to be good for the company.
Yeah. Before we move away from the announcers, Kevin Kelly will probably miss about a month. He confirmed that he'll be at the G1 Climax tournament from middle of July to middle of August. So he had said, and I think he quoted a tweet saying, someone said, "Oh, you're going to miss the G1 now." I said, "No, there's a lot of announcers that could fill in for me in that time." So they do have a healthy crop of announcers. And I'd like you mentioned, that they went with Nigel and Kevin Kelly, because they easily could have went with Taz and Paul White or something like that. And I don't think that would have had the same feel, because Kevin Kelly, Nigel McGuinness, they make the moments feel big, similar to how Michael Cole and Taz did the same thing for SmackDown back in the day, where it wasn't
JR legit. They feel legit too. It's not, I love Mark Henry. I love Paul White, but they aren't known as commentators. I feel like the only other person, if they would have slipped them in rather than a Nigel or Kevin Kelly, that I would have been excited about would have been Mauro Ranallo.
Agreed. Yeah.
That was the only other guy on the table that I was hoping for. I had Kevin Kelly in mind, but I was like, is his commitments to New Japan going to keep him from doing this? I didn't know, but I figured Nigel would fall into one of those slots. And I was just wondering, like, is it going to be Kevin Kelly? Is it going to be Mauro? But I'm a big Kevin Kelly mark, so I was happy either way.
Yeah. And looking at Kevin Kelly, when he first came on screen, I mean, he's on social media and he tweets but it's very by the book. I was thinking about, I've never heard his take on the AEW product too. That was that was very
I
interesting to
know.
me because then he's providing insight, obviously within the canon of the AEW broadcast, but your opinions fit in there. If you've noticed during the main event, which we'll get to, Nigel McGuinness did say looks like Punk was scared of Samoa Joe, and both announcers, JR and Kevin Kelly, were quick to fix that and like, no, he's definitely cautious, but not scared. So very interesting to see the dynamic of how they perceive the product, because this is all new to them as well.
And hats off to Kevin Kelly, because I don't think a lot of fans think about this. This guy, who knows if he's consuming the weekly product on a super nerd level where he knows the ins and outs. So if he gets this job, he's going to have to dive in and figure out who's who, what's going on. It reminds me of Jimmy Smith when Jimmy Smith took the role in Raw, and he talked about like, hey, I haven't watched wrestling since the Dusty Rhodes days, so I had to kind of do my homework. And I thought Jimmy Smith, I know they got rid of him. I liked Jimmy Smith on Raw. I thought he added like a kind of a prestige, a sports prestige to their commentary team. The new guy, not big on him. Forget his name. Shiny Happy People guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, hats off to Kevin Kelly for really putting in the work, because I didn't catch a lot of that. Oh, he's new to the product. He kind of slid in like a glove.
And I think the crossovers and up between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW, that a lot of the names there he's familiar with. And he comes across to me always as a passionate wrestling fan. And you mentioned Jimmy Smith, you mentioned all the other announcers that WWE have tried to bring in that are just outsiders. And there's something you can't teach about being a passionate fan, where you can read all you want about what happened in 1993, but if you didn't experience it, doesn't resonate with you the same way. And 100%. Kevin Kelly, as you mentioned, has been in WWF back in the day. I mean, if you go back, he was 1998. We're doing the Shot Nostalgia. He's the backstage reporter being bullied by The Rock and Stone Cold. And so I mean, he's been in the wrestling business for close to 30 years, if not more. So this is probably the biggest opportunity he has. I know people will say New Japan Pro Wrestling and commentating for Wrestle Kingdom, but on an American stage, I'm so glad he's getting the opportunity to show everybody what he can do, because he's so talented and very, very much underrated in that landscape. Everyone gives the flowers to all the familiar faces, and those are deserved, but Kevin Kelly definitely deserves what he's getting his way in the coming weeks, because people are going to see him shine. And I think he's going to lead the way and push the other commentary team to get better, which is another good thing.
Yeah, he is a solid workman commentary guy. Like he doesn't necessarily have the flash that I think a lot of fans kind of that hits with fans. Like Excalibur's got his, I can speak a mile a minute and say every move correctly. Morrow's got his, Mamma Mia. There's all these big, JR's even got a little flashiness, especially back in the day. So, but what I like about Kevin Kelly is he's unassuming at first. Like he's almost got that Michael Cole vibe, early Michael Cole vibe. And I know a lot of people hate Michael Cole. I'm not big on Michael Cole, but Cole is great at what he does. Just the air traffic controller of the show. And I think Kevin Kelly drives the show really well. And I was beyond thrilled with the commentary team. I think immediately they throw their hat in the ring of, hey, these guys could be one of the best teams in pro wrestling when it comes to commentary. And if not already throwing their hat in the ring, they could get there, where I can just see these two guys, Nigel and KK, gelling really well.
Yeah, so let's move into the show quick and get into the meat of it. And of course, we're going to tie it together with that ESPN article that dropped just a day prior for CM Punk. People put their tinfoil hats on thinking it's building up the drama to hopefully a program that we're getting. And we got a little bit of the seedlings for those plants to be, harvested in the future. But opening up with the CM Punk promo, of course, I'm not going to make the people wait in Chicago. And he got a thunderous ovation, and there were some signs in the crowd that were negative towards Punk. But for the most part,
he was
very
over.
Positive reaction.
Yeah.
This will be home base. Of course, the real test will be when he goes to different cities and does the shtick here. But Man, I thought it was a heel promo. I felt there was heelish tendencies in the promo that, I mean, maybe it's the shaved head on Punk because that you're so used to that run he had feuding with Taker, because that's just me when he has the shaved head.
He's a bad
But
guy.
yeah, but for your thoughts on CM Punk as far as the promo, I don't think it was his best promo, but I mean, he flubbed a little bit of what he was saying, which is so unlike him, but it seems like the nerves were getting to him because he was excited. But for the most part, the functionality of the promo, I like how they drove the reality of it a little bit. They teased on it, but also picked up where they left off in canon, where they didn't show the AEW championship, but the fact that it was in the bag, that makes sense. Because if you look at it from, if this is real, he never really lost the title. So you pick up where you left off. And, I have my own thoughts on just the interview and stuff, but I thought presentation wise, it's good to have him back on screen. Whether I believe he's being genuine and all that stuff in the article, that's a different story. But as far as like star power, you felt it on the show.
I think you felt it tenfold. And I think he proved that. I know we've all had our opinions on him, throughout this whole thing since the brawl out. I've been very transparent that I've flip-flopped back and forth. One week I'm like with the Elite, one week I'm with Punk. But the thing about, no matter how you feel about him, and he kind of alluded to it in this promo, the reason we're so pissed at him and the reason that we love him so much, that's what makes him a fucking superstar, guys. Like the fact that we care. The people that don't care, we don't get hot about and get so tore up about. And I'm not saying some of the choices that he made, the brawl out, all that isn't bad for the company, or set them back, hurt the fan base in some ways. That all may be true. But if Peter Avalon was at that scrum and went off like this, it wouldn't really have the impact. Not to hate on Pretty Peter, but it's just the facts of the matter. Like, I think his star power is what we're talking about him, man. But just to get to the promo, and I agree with you, Ace. It wasn't, was this a pipe bomb? Was this big, flashy, man, there's all these things. This is one of the best promos Punk's ever given. Maybe not that, but I thought the way it was structured, the things he touched on, I thought this was a master class. The way he, like you said, he teased, he didn't shy away from the elephant in the room. He talked about it multiple times in certain ways. He addressed the apology situation. Everyone was wondering if he was going to apologize. And then he took that time to take a dig at the fans, like, I'm not going to apologize, people. You're as soft as the wrestlers you like. Say what you want. Great line. It does exactly what it was intended to do. Get the people riled up. He drops the counterfeit bucks thing, got the crowd fired up. And I love the fact he's holding this bag. And I love the fact that he didn't even have to take the title out. Almost not taking the title out made it bigger for me. We know what's in that bag. All he had to do was hold it up and say, you talk about putting on the best dog collar match. I won that dog collar match. And he had that bag, which instantly, from a storytelling perspective, what I love about that, if you're holding that title, how do you play into the title picture? That instantly puts him still in there. And you are 100% rock solid, dead on, Ace. This was 1000% a heel promo. The fans were loving him because he's in his hometown, but we're going to see moving forward that we are in a Bret Hart Canada scenario where he's going to be beloved like MJF in Long Island when he's in Chicago. But when he's elsewhere, I think we're going to see a heel because he had moments like when he says that line about, I am the truth and the truth is painful. That's heel shit. When he says, what did David Zasloff call me? He calls me one Bill Phil. That's a heel promo. Nobody anywhere outside of Chicago, nobody's cheering that. But the one Bill Phil thing leads into the, I'm in an industry full of counterfeit bucks. Like, that's an expertly done under the radar heel promo. And dude, I was wondering what they were going to do. I thought they would start with Punk, but I didn't know where he was in the main event, how they would do it. And I'm sitting there, like I said, I ran from the yard into the room. I'm watching the intro. There's that long pause where they're just hanging on the shot of the entire arena, and then Living Color kicks on, and I'm like, fuck yeah, what a way to kick the show off. We want to hear from the guy. You're not making us wait. Here he is. Let's hear what he has to say. And I thought he knocked it out of the park, man. I thought it was a great way to kick this show off.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say is a big piece is if they don't do this Elite versus FTR and CM Punk program, they're in trouble, man, because you have the whole crowd. And I know it's Chicago and stuff, but the fact that they're chanting "fuck the Elite," initiated by his comments, unless this is expertly done, everyone got in the room and everyone wants to talk that it's going to happen, and
which is a possibility. I think
so too. It's a problem because it's never going to go away. Similar to Bret Hart in 97, it never quite went away because no one really addressed it until it was too late, and everyone continues to live off it. There's still podcasts that come out and talk about it. And I think in 30 years, there's probably going to be still podcasts to talk about the brawl out.
Yep.
So I think I walked away hopeful that they can make this program work and give people a reason within storyline to boo Punk and bring in those fans that have no idea what he's alluding to with the Buck stuff. I thought enough of it was done in the promo that it felt like, all right, let's get back to the wrestling. He's the uncrowned champion. The king is back, all that stuff, and play into the character. I want more of the stuff on screen. Of course, you can blur the line and bring the Elite stuff in and talk about that. But I think if you're not going to address it on screen in a character wise, you can't control the narrative, and it continues to spin out of control like a wheeling dervish somewhere. You need to find a way to grab it and make it your own and have it live in your AEW lineage and say, this is what we did. We all got together and we put it on the biggest stage possible at All In at Wembley. They have to do it now. I know we've been saying that, but now that he's back in the fold, they fucking have to do this now. They have to.
I'm right there with you, man. I think if you can't have these little counterfeit bucks, soft, your wrestlers are soft. You can't have comments like that. And I think he did make a comment early on where he's like, this is a wrestling business.
Yes.
And that was even a shot at the Bucks to me. Like, that's a shot at all the people that's like, put the bullshit aside and let's do this. Like, I think if you do not do this, like you said, it will grow legs and it will become the thing that fans cannot get past. And I think some fans are already there, and anything else will be a failure. I don't think fans will let it go. I don't think fans will let it slide. I think you're going to get fuck the Elite chants and fuck CM Punk chants for a while. If we're in California, Punk's getting booed out of the building. Like the Rancho Cucamonga boys are going to be reigning supreme. So I do think that I think this is all a good sign, though. I really do. There's something in me that says if he's talking about it like this, now I do think he has a little stroke where he can probably get away with saying things like this, and Tony just, hey, we got to let him talk. The fans expect something. But I think the fact that he was hitting so hard on it, it's the writing on the wall, the tea leaves, whatever you want to call it. I think there's a positive spin there, at least for me as a fan, where I'm hopeful now. Before I was like, I don't know if I don't think they have the balls to do this, but the fact that they're touching on it, it could be a genius move if done correctly. Yeah. I know we have been talking about on the flagship, me and you've been talking about it, Ace, when we talk about it, it's like, it felt like a criminal rookie booking move to not bring him back straight into that storyline. Okay. But this could be a genius move if the whole reason they're kind of waiting on it is if you get into this situation where when you tune into Collision, there's subtle shots alluding to this thing coming. When you tune into Dynamite, the Elite are taking subtle digs, and the Elite had that Twitter bio change where they referenced Punk.
Pro
So
wrestling tease.
The pro wrestling tease thing. So if they get into a situation where each opposing side on their show, Dynamite and Collision, are kind of subtly building to this thing, and it could lift both shows up in ratings, and then you could start playing with some sort of a invasion. Imagine 6 months from now. I'm not saying it should take that long, but imagine 6 months from now, all of a sudden FTR runs in on Dynamite and attacks the Bucks. And there's been subtle hints, or Punk attacks Omega on Dynamite, or vice versa. The Elite shows up on Collision. It's going to be a big moment. So if they do this right, I feel like it could elevate both shows in the ratings and in the eyes of the fans.
Yeah, I think so. And at this point, it's the worst kept secret of what happened. So if you start to ignore it, as we mentioned, it takes a life of its own. But touching on the interview he did for ESPN, and highly edited, if you guys look at it, there were some sentences that feel like they weren't finished. Looked like he was about to dive into the Wrestling Observer Radio and rip on Dave Meltzer. It just didn't happen. This interview did nothing for me to change perspective. It's from his point of view. The one thing I pulled from it, of course, was him saying Hangman was shooting on him, which if that is completely on his end, like if this is all truthful and this is not becoming like a weaved story that they're trying to create, because it was strategically dropped a day before Collision. So you got to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
But if you're saying Hangman was going into business for himself and then the Bucks post their story, it feels like things haven't gotten better. And Hangman's been silent about all this. He's been one of those guys that hasn't said anything. He's gone out there and just put on banger matches. He's been one of the pillars of AEW without being mentioned as a pillar. He's a guy, one of the first world champions out there, just grinding young star that could be a superstar elsewhere. But man, the interview itself, like I was expecting more of fireworks than we got, because when I think it was Sean Ross Sapp posted saying, oh man, there's gonna be some drama. People aren't happy. And I can see why people would be unhappy, but I looked at the interview, I'm like, that's it. Like, that's all he said. Like, this is just fodder that we've been dealing with in a lot of ways. And the other thing about the leaks and stuff that he talks about, it seems like the Elite, by his own words, aren't talking to anybody. So a lot of it, the leaks and whatever, is coming from his camp too. So I feel like the narrative has been driven on his side, where it makes me believe that, I don't know, there's not much going on as far as conversation on the Elite side, bringing that out there, unless you want to say that people are making things up. But that's a whole other story of I guess, undermining the wrestling media. So, and that wasn't where he went in this interview. I fully expected, and maybe he had that conversation on the ESPN interview, and they just cut it out and made it just neat little packages, because I'm sure they talked for over 2 hours and they only put out 4 or 5 big excerpts. So I didn't pull anything away from that. I expected this to be the big story, like, oh my God, all the drama now. It just was like, that's it. That's all they said.
No, they built it up. I mean, Wade Keller, Sean Ross Sapp said there was going to be this bombshell, and I thought the interview was safe. It was fine. I thought if he went in there and didn't say anything about what happened, I would have been livid. Let's be honest. I would have been absolutely livid if he didn't even touch on it. So I was expecting him to touch on it, and I don't think he buried the company. I think the biggest not burial, but the biggest negative remark towards the company was when he's like, shit still hasn't been fixed. You know, I think in the early beginning of that interview, he says, and shit still hasn't been fixed. But he said his relationship with Tony Khan was great. I thought it was a pretty, like, kind of softball interview. Like, but I will say the one thing I did like about this interview, though, was we got his take. You know what I mean? Like, we can nitpick, pull it apart and say, is he telling the truth? Is this a work? Like, all of that. But at least we got his take. Shoot or work take that it is. I like that we heard from him. I like that he put the onus on he put the onus on the Bucks and said, I've been trying to reach out to those dudes. And every time I reach out, I get a call back from the lawyer saying, stop trying to reach out. And I mean, if this is a straight shoot and they're not working with stuff like that, that is painting the Elite in, I think, a little bit negative of a light. I mean, even within our little tavern group, man, look at how young Anthony last night said, I'm now back on Punk's side. Fuck the Elite.
That's all
And,
it took, a promo in the interview.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, young Anthony feels that way. There's going to be other fans. That interview did exactly what Punk was trying to do, of like, hey, man, stop blaming me. You guys don't know the story. There's other things behind. And I got to be honest, like, I'm not on either side. I'm on the side of just seeing this story happen on my TV. And I love both crews. I like Punk, but I love the Elite. And I don't want to ever pick sides. But hearing Punk say that, I'm like, it was nice. And it was one of those things where I'm like, we're so quick to attack and put perception and put the opinions of reporters and how they felt everything went down. But like, we don't know what Punk really feels. We didn't know. And we can call him a liar, but that's what he's saying, man. That's his perspective of what happened. And
100%.
what do they say? What do they say? They always say there's your side, there's my side, and there's the truth.
Yep.
So the fact that the Elite haven't even really spoke on it. I mean, Omega kind of spoke on it with that interview with Renee a couple months ago. And he was very, very, I would say, middle of the road, and wasn't taking sides, wasn't throwing shots. It was a very respectable take on the entire situation. But I loved hearing Punk's perspective. I think it did well for him. I think a lot of fans jumped behind that and was like, man, he's the one. The Bucks are the ones holding this back. They won't even talk to him. It just if you take his interview, his ESPN interview at face value, I did think it made the Bucks look a little childish. Like, let's put all this dumb shit behind us and work together. And if they're really just kind of giving him the silent treatment, as a fan, that makes me say, come on, guys. Like, this is being childish. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for him, he put all of his feelings on Front Street with the scrum. So that's immediately what he's working behind, trying to rehabilitate that. And the people that are fans of him are going to give him credit for it, and they're going to not pass judgment on that. But to me, that's the most egregious thing you can do as a leader in the locker room. If Hangman did what he did and was wrong, and he decided to go into business for himself with the promo, you are supposed to be this de facto leader. You base yourself on wanting to be this guy. Show other people how to do it. I mean, that's just 101 leadership. Like, the fact that if the Bucks and the Elite and everyone was doing the wrong thing, and you sunk down to their level, now everybody's at fault.
I'm with you. He's a hothead. He's a hothead first and foremost. I mean, I don't think he's ever said it. He's never said he wasn't. But I don't think he was necessarily lying. I think that's just his crazy, old school, paranoid wrestler brain. We've 100%. Countless stories.
The Hangman promo, to me, like, again, we're not in his head, so what Hangman said should have just been addressed in the ring. Like, just, you have the microphone, you don't like what he's saying to you, go back at him. And I think Punk could bury Hangman on the microphone right there, and it kind of ends it. But the fact that this festered, and there was this he said, she said about the Colt Cabana thing, and go back to, I mean, I don't want to get into the full thing again, but then Tony Khan never addressed it. This thing grew weeds everywhere.
Well,
but I think
the big thing, real quick, not to cut you off, just so we don't move past it, but the thing I think that it hit me the hardest in this was with the Hangman situation, was where he talked when he went into that match. I believe it was a Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
And he said he felt like this guy might try to hurt me. And I liked the perspective, because fans don't think about this with wrestlers. If you have two guys who have real heat in real life, and they go into a match, and somebody accidentally stiffs you on a forearm and cracks you in the nose harder than they're supposed to, in your head, you would be like, hold on, did that guy just make a honest mistake, or was he really trying to lay it in right there? And then your mind goes into should I receipt him? Should I crack him back? All of this. So the mental gymnastics you have to do when you're wrestling a guy you have real heat with, I think that's a real thing. And I think that's a real thing as old as time when it comes to pro wrestling. Bully Ray on Twitter even jumped in. He didn't speak directly on it, but the tweet obviously was speaking about this, he was like, me and RVD have cracked each other hard and receded each other in the ring thousands of times, and we never have, and we could always work together. Something along those lines. Just saying, like, sometimes you got to just throw the receipt and all is gone. You're in the ring. But anyway, not to cut you off. I just had to say that.
There's just that fits kind of what I was saying as well. Like, you're calling, old school. You want to preach old school and soft and stuff, but that's what limited the match in that capacity. I don't know. Keep up with that level. I mean, we'll get a chance to see if it was just that. The reason why, because that match sucked. I mean, let's be honest with you. He wasn't able to keep up with Hangman, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't working. That match could have been their chemistry, because he had good matches going in with Darby and partners that kind of matched his style, where he's at this point. He'll get the opportunity on a big stage, and the bar has been raised about in-ring quality with some of the same opponents that he's had. Look at MJF at this point. He's miles better than he was where Punk left. And that's only happened in a short span of time. So if he's going to work with MJF again, you better bring a lunch and get it in, because he's not going to be able to sit on the apron like he did in that tag match and catch his breath. It's going to be off to the races soon, and you're going to have to be in the ring. And if he's not going to be 100%. In the ring, that is what it is. Like, if you're going to be just showcasing the highlights there, that's done. You can do the Sting approach, but I think he wants to be viewed in a certain light work rate wise, because I think this Hangman match, whether it was Hangman or not, that performance has ate at him since it happened.
Well, you said in the group chat, I don't know if it was the PF chat or our tavern chat, but I think there's a lot of validity in what you said. Of those things may have been irking at him in his mind, like, is Hangman going to shoot on me in the match, all of that. But I do think there is ego here of that's a way for him to explain away a bad performance. Not to say that the mental gymnastics he's playing in that match, shoot work, didn't affect the match, 100%. But I do think him putting that out there is like, guys, I know that match sucked. I botched a buckshot lariat, but here's what was going on. That's a way to cover his ass. I agree.
Yeah. And, before we move on from it, because there's other stuff we want to talk about that happened in the wrestling ring, but Luchasaurus is the new TNT champion, by the way, guys.
Right.
I think a lot of the frustration on his end is watching, Omega and Hangman. It's a different style, but the athleticism is just never what he was able to do. So I think in that match, he tried to match what Hangman was doing instead of just leaning on what makes him good. I mean, at this point, he's already established himself as a legend in wrestling. So why would you move away from the style that has brought you to the dance? I think at this point, you have to highlight your strengths instead of going out there and doing things that are just not in your wheelhouse. And there's certain things, like Terry Funk couldn't do certain things. And Terry Funk was a great worker. So I just think with Punk, there was something that got lost in translation while he was like, I wouldn't say it was a contest of dick measuring or whatever with Hangman about, I can be more athletic than you. But I think that's where the match kind of sucked, because he was trying to be that Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay type. And it's just not what he's able to do. I'm not hating on him, and maybe people will take it as that. I think be who you are. Like, I don't think any guy that's a money-making wrestler, like Stone Cold's not going to go in there and try to do the buckshot lariat, and that's okay. Stone Cold's still one of the best workers of our generation.
Yeah, I think that was just like a trying to, how the guy will try to do the other guy's move is kind of a FU in the match. Like, but I'm with you. I've never thought of Punk as Ospreay Omega work rate guy. I've always loved his matches. I think he's a great in-ring storyteller, but he has his style, and I love his style. He doesn't have to go a mile a minute for me. And I think coming in, being gone so long, there was definitely a little bit of that puff your chest out, say you can hang with the young guys. But I like the way Punk works. I always have. I think he tells really good stories. Go back and watch those Cena matches, man. They put on bangers, like
100%.
And it wasn't, Cena's not a work rate guy either. I mean, 5 moves of doom, but I hope the ego and all of that is gone. It'll never be completely gone, but I'm saying, as far as like in the ring with these guys, even if it's not gone, it's going to make for great TV.
Like, what I
I'm
want
just
AEW to do
excited.
is grab a hold of the narrative and now bring it to your canon where now the line is blurred.
Yes.
What was real, what's not. And then you can also reconstruct how everything went down, because at the end of the day, the 3 letters AEW was damaged from everything that went down. And by chanting fuck the elite and fuck CM Punk, you're damaging the brand, a promotion that is still in its history making phase. So we want to make sure we're protecting the environment that these wrestlers are getting paid a lot of money, and the promotion is about to get a huge new TV deal. We want to make sure we're first and foremost protecting the 3 letters that's buttering everybody's bread here. So we can't
yeah, that's a great point. And I think I think it was on a debate where I said the one thing you cannot do is have Punk come back and go against the company. Because
I think Tom said he wanted Punk to come in and bury the whole company.
Right. And I think that would be bad if he buried the whole company. Burying the elite, I'm fine with. I think that's fine. I got a little nervous, I got to be honest, because we didn't mention this. When Punk started his promo, what's the first thing he does before he speaks? He unscrews the AEW logo around the mic stick and pulls it off and just speaks with a regular microphone. When he made that move, I was like, oh shit, we're going to get an AEW burial right here. But he didn't go that route, which I thought was smart. That was a very subtle way to do it without burying the company. And honestly, man, I'm with you. I think all of this has hurt AEW, all of the drama of the last, 10 months or whatever. But I do think they still have it in their hand if handled correctly. I think at the end of the day, if they handle it correctly, we could come out much better. They could use this, and it could put the company in a much better position than they were even before Brawl Out. So it's all in how they do it.
And also, I mean, in the main event, we saw locking up Jay White and CM Punk, which was a cool moment. Samoa Joe and CM Punk, which first time in how many years?
6,000 days.
Yeah, crazy, dude. So
crazy.
Samoa Joe was not taking it easy on Punk, and you can tell that he's like, all right, welcome back, dude, and in a good, friendly way. So absolutely love that. Match was, we had our critique on the match as far as formatting, but though it did its job and set programs for the future. And I got to say, looking forward to a Punk versus Samoa Joe match. I think it could really have some legs for a program that if you're not going to go right into the elite program, because I will stand by, they have to eventually do it.
Yes.
Samoa Joe versus CM Punk is a good consolation prize for anybody.
Dude, the stare down when they finally both tagged in and they're standing in the middle of the ring, literally goosebumps. Like, just thinking about it now, I have goosebumps on my arm. Like, it was a moment. And maybe not for the fans that, just tried and true WWE fans that don't know the history, but for fans that remember those ROH days, that trilogy of matches they had, you set up in your seat when that happened. And I got to be honest, like, I'm pumped. I am pumped for a return to those two going at it in singles competition. But the thing I'm more excited about, just from a promo standpoint and a size matchup standpoint, I think Jay White and CM Punk could really, because Jay White is such a good, safe worker. He does everything so clean. I think he would be someone great to protect Punk, and their size kind of matches up where Punk's not going to be trying to lift, the heavy weight of Joe and work within that. I think that could be a banger program if they do it right.
Yeah. Before we move on from Jay White, since you just said his name, there was a conversation, I think it was on Observer Radio or elsewhere, where they were talking about why Jay White hasn't really resonated with the American audience yet. And someone made a good point. Maybe it was Dave, maybe it was Brian, I forget. But they had said, at this point, he hasn't been able to go out there and work 45 minutes. He's not a guy you can consume in bite-sized pieces. He only has 8 minutes. You think about the Ricky Starks match, maybe it was 11, something like that.
Right.
He needs more time to tell a story in the ring and get people invested. And I think hopefully if he has a long form program with the eyes on Punk, and then you can see Jay White by proxy, how well he can work and be the guy he can provide on the product, because he's just another wrestler. But there's a lot of guys out there that if you give them the time, Jay White being first and foremost, could really tell a story and be your top guy. Like, I don't think people realize that he was the top guy in New Japan for a very long time for a reason. Once Kenny left, Jay White was tagged in, and he held the banner high and took the promotion and kept it at the same level. So I think he can do the same in AEW if they give him the chance.
Absolutely. Jay White being matched up with Punk is exactly what Jay White needs in the American national TV pro wrestling market.
Yep.
Because like you said, New Japan fans know how big of a deal he was. He took the place of Omega in the Bullet Club. Like, he was a big deal, held the title, all of that good stuff. If you put him in a program with Punk, one, you're going to garner long matches, which you're going to see what this kid can do. He's incredible. Two, you're going to have good promos between the two of them. I think Jay White's a solid promo. I think those two guys trading barbs in the ring and on the mic is going to be great to elevate Jay White to the place I feel he deserves to be within the eyes of the AEW faithful. And I think Jay White, in my opinion, it's such a loaded roster. You kind of have to take your time to get into that main event scene. But Jay White, for me, they could have brought him in right at the main event level and I would have been okay with it. He could have entered into feuds with Moxley, Omega, all of the top guys, and I feel like it would have fit. I think they used him to elevate Ricky a little bit, but I think Punk could bring White to where he needs to be in the company.
Yeah, I mean, final assessment on Collision is another 2 hours of prominent TV that you saw guys we haven't seen. And it's not just disgruntled workers. We saw guys that have been on the shows not showcased in the same way. And we're going to get 2 hours of meaningful story. And if that continues down the line, the company just benefits. And ratings hopefully find their way on a Saturday night. They're going to have a tough slog with football and everything going on throughout Saturdays. But Saturday live wrestling, it's going to be a reason to tune in and give people a reason to tune in at this point.
Dude, if they keep up with the vibe and the feeling, this show is going to do A-okay. Is it going to do gangbuster ratings? No. But I think it's going to be a success for Warner Brothers Discovery. They're going to like it. I think wrestling fans will tune in, whether it's live or the next morning with their Sunday coffee. I think people will tune in. I mean, the Andrade Buddy Matthews match, awesome.
Yep.
It was great seeing Andrade back, and they shoot the angle at the end. There was the moment of looking for respect, the handshake. Andrade goes over, he's offering a handshake, lights go out, House of Black come in. We have a program. Maybe Andrade is going to link back up with Roosh and the boys to go after those trios. That was awesome. We get Miro coming in on a squash. We put the TNT title's actually back on TNT, and they changed the title with Christian getting involved, cracking Wardlow. There was a lot of good stuff, and I love the Acclaimed coming out and being like, hey, we're going to be on Dynamite and we're going to be on Collision. So we know it's not a hard brand split. The people that want to work and get better will float between the shows, and then you'll have those tried and trues. I came out of it, man, just a happy wrestling fan. Like, I'm excited for the future. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I really do.
The biggest difference is 4 letters. It's LIVE. It's live. That's what sets it apart, man. Like, you can't look at even the Monday Night Wars and watch history for that. There's a difference between Nitro being live and Raw being taped.
Yep.
There's something to be said about that. When I'm watching anything taped, whether it be SmackDown or even when Dynamite's preempted or rent, it just takes the steam out. When you're watching live, there was a chance the Bucks could have come out during that promo. And there's not that chance if it was taped because we would have heard about it. So
exactly.
All right, let's get to big story number 2 and talk about everything going on Friday nights.
Big story 2.
Well, we move into our next chapter of this Bloodline saga, and it seems like we're at the Civil War portion of this. WWE announced on their SmackDown Lowdown show that Reigns and Sikoa will battle the Usos in London in what is being billed as the Bloodline Civil War at, of course, Money in the Bank in July. This segment we saw on SmackDown, awesome stuff here. The Usos going back and forth. They finally pulled the trigger. Jey Uso super kicked Roman Reigns, and you also had them teaming up together after and put the final blow as he's coming to. What else
can take out Sikoa?
Yeah. What else can we say about this story as far as masterfully done? WWE is really milking this cash cow for all it's worth. And they have I don't know where they're going to go for the summer and elsewhere, but everything that Cody had said in that promo has come true. He is now a chief without a tribe. He's about to be a family leader without a family, and he's about to be a champ without a belt. Like, I think that is eventually the prophecy's been foretold by Mr. Rhodes himself, and it's all breaking down. And I think this is the right time to do it, because if you hold on a little bit longer, and maybe because they teased for a second that Jay was going to stay and Jimmy was out, and maybe they would have done the swerve 2 weeks from now and figured it out. This is the right time. Pull the trigger for London, have this masterful match between the two teams, and big moment. The London crowd is gonna eat this up with a spoon, man. Like, just sit there and just put a bib on and enjoy it. I can't say enough good things. And the facial expressions by everyone involved, this has to be looked at as far as awards go. Like cinematic or television awards needs to be considered, because Jey Uso, man, probably the best actor in all of wrestling. I buy everything that guy says.
I think the best thing about the Bloodline story to me has been, I mean, Roman's great. Let's be honest. He was in a bad spot before the Bloodline. A lot of fans weren't buying in. I think Roman is the obvious thing that's changed, and now he's the biggest thing in pro wrestling. But to me, the best thing of the Bloodline story is the elevation of all those around him. I think the Usos it's night and day.
Yeah.
Go back to 2018 Usos, 2019 Usos, and then now look at the Usos. To me, it's night and day. Everyone around them have bought in. You can tell they've been putting the work in on the back end of just like the acting, the facials, everything lands. That's why this works for me the most, is just the sheer acting in it is great. It's wild to me. When is Money in the Bank? What is it?
July 1st, I believe, is the.
Yeah. So it's wild to me that something this big, any other storyline, like any other like pay-per-view to pay-per-view storyline, this is your go home episode. You have them turn on him the Friday before the pape. But with this, there's so many layers to this story that they can get away just dropping something like this on a regular SmackDown. Like, this was a big moment. This felt like a pay-per-view moment, a pay-per-view turn, and it's just on a middle of the month SmackDown. You brought up Cody and how he kind of prophesized this with, you're going to be a king without a tribe, or a chief without a tribe. Do you think Cody going against Roman means more if he's at the height of his powers with his entire tribe behind him? Because that's how he's kept this title, is all of these guys helping him keep the title, the Usos, Solo, all of this. Or does it mean more if Cody has him one-on-one and he's lost his tribe? To me, it's not as big for Cody to beat him when everyone else has already left him. I kind of wanted Roman to lose the title where someone managed to do it when he had everybody with him, and then the loss of the title kind of brought the cracks into the family, the bloodline. What do you think, Ace? Does it mean more if someone beats him without his tribe, or someone beats him with his tribe?
I just think it's different. You can make the argument that Cody and Sammy and Kevin Owens have taken them down from within, trying
That's
to
true.
give, having the Usos drink the Kool-Aid. And if you want to look at it from a kayfabe point of view, maybe there's conversations and being the good person that Cody is, he's trying to rehabilitate these people to get out of this toxic situation you're in. But we talked about this as far as, Avengers at the end with Thanos all wounded and he eventually gets his head cut off while he's like making soup in the woods.
Right.
I think that's what it's going to be with Roman. At the end of the day, he's going to fight his damnedest to hold that title. And I hope that it's at this point until WrestleMania, because they have to do that. It has to be a big stage. He's going to fight to keep it and barely hold on to it. The armor is going to be gone. I think maybe we'll see him get pinned in this time period. Maybe he'll get pinned in this match. Probably not, though. They're going to figure out a way to make him look weak but strong at the same time, because all his armor is being chipped away from what he was holding on to him to make him so strong. I have confidence down the line that they're going to make the right choice, because every turn of it, I was ready to pull out of give it to Sammy, give it to figure out a different way. I was knee-jerk reaction. And a lot of times, and I don't want to speak in hyperbole about this storyline, but it could have shifted how stories are told, at least in WWE, where patience is being forecasted and they're not just giving people what they want in the immediate because they're confident whether it's the guaranteed TV rights and they're not based on buy rates on pay-per-view, they're going to sit there and have the patience to sit through stuff that people are maybe not happy with. They're not giving the right decision because the payoff is worth it. What made this moment so worth it was following this for the past 3 years and watching Jey Uso be abused and be a lapdog for Roman Reigns, and finally has that moment. Yeah, it was on a SmackDown, but I feel like they're building towards the bigger picture. Like looking at this, I know they've been creating that Bloodline YouTube compilation and throwing it all together. I think they're keeping that in their mind at this point. And I think other stories are going to benefit from this because we're so used to wrestling just being hotshotted to get to the next pay-per-view and sell. You mentioned it, like on the Go Home show. They're always, in the past, always trying to sell the next event. Come to us live. That's always been the wrestling business. This is next level type of storytelling that only a company like WWE can do, that has such guaranteed income that they don't have to just hotshot things to appease fans to get in the building. They're just comfortable where they're at, and the storyline's benefiting from it. And at the same time, being challenged on the other side to put on the better stories. And I think it's just kind of, it's feeding into itself at this point. It's iron sharpening iron, as cliche as it is. They're finding a way to, every time the writers in that room are making this story a little bit better because the challenge is there. Nobody wants to fuck this story up. So it's all finding a way to work. And we still haven't seen the conclusion yet. Maybe the conclusion is not good. And sometimes we watch TV shows and the finale is not as good as the ride, but sometimes it is. I'm hoping this is more Breaking Bad than maybe like the Sopranos or Lost.
Hey, the Sopranos ending was good. But I get what you're saying. It was,
I'm just saying, as far as feedback goes, people were very critical of it. Yeah. I think it's aged over time, but
yeah,
I think like this deserves a ending that universally will be loved, and I think people have the patience to wait for it at this point.
I agree 100%. I hope this is a template for the way wrestling stories can be done moving forward. I think we give WWE a lot of shit. All fans, not all. I mean, there are the WWE faithful that eat up everything they do, but there's a lot of criticism of they treat fans like they're dumb. And I think in a lot of ways, the way they treat pro wrestling like it's only in the WWE universe, things like that do wear on me. But I think this storyline, they've treated fans like they are the smartest fans in the room. I mean, you're counting on fans to buy in to a 3-year almost story. I think the Bloodline story is like an HBO drama within a show.
Yeah.
Like it is like we're seeing Succession on our SmackDown or our Raw, wherever they pull the segment at. Like it's a show within a show. It's almost wild to me. Like when you see some of the other stuff floating around on a SmackDown or a Raw, it's so secondary to the Bloodline story. Like if you take the Bloodline story out of WWE over the last 3 years, what do you have? I mean, this is a top 5 story all time. I mean, you can get it. Some people say it's the best. So, but you've got stories like Brett and Shawn. You've got stories like Austin and McMahon. You've got the NWO story. There's tons of people you can go with. But as far as dedicating your company weekly to a story like this, hats off to WWE for really locking in long term and giving a lot of twists and turns. Maybe some of the twists people didn't like as much. Maybe you loved every moment of it, but you can't deny what a ride we've been on. And I hope this is a sign of things to come with future storylines. I hope they can get investment in this from other people, like other wrestlers. I hope they give other wrestlers the opportunity to tell stories like this, not just the top dog Roman. Like, who's next? Who are you going to give a big story like this to next? I think this is one of those perfect scenarios, though. You've got this dynasty of a wrestling family. Paul Heyman has history with them, and they come together to make this just epic wrestling story that's rooted in wrestling mythology and history with the Anoa'i family. I mean, I think it's expertly done, not just in what the potential is for future wrestling storytelling, but also this has elevated all of these guys to like mythic levels. Like
Yeah.
Roman was big, but prior to Bloodline, he was people liked him, but now he's being mentioned with the Hogans. And it's all kayfabe. They've kept the belt on him, but I think WWE trying to update or modernize their titles and their history, championship history, and with Gunther about to take the IC title record, and I think it's been a smart move. I think new fans, these are our Hogans, these are our Brunos. I think it's very smart. My one question back to you, Ace, is do you think this is the last? Are we just now we've turned the corner? The bloodline has crumbled. The Usos are out. We've got Solo. Maybe Solo turns on Roman here in the coming months. Is this it? Like, are we getting ready to see Roman all by himself? Or do they have an ace up their sleeve? Is there any world we live in where possibly a Jacob Fatu comes in? Or is there another layer we have yet to see coming? Or are we on the back half of this storyline?
I think what we have seen throughout history, not just in wrestling, what do they do in a blockbuster movie? They make a sequel. So they're going to find a way to continue this, whether it's not. I think Roman's taking a break after WrestleMania 40. But they can continue this story with, like you said, reinvigorating. That family is just continually to grow. And we see pictures of like Umaga's kids, and there's enough meat on the bone as far as reinvigorating new faces into it. And will the sequel be as good as the first movie? Probably not. But I think this story is going to be consistently written throughout the rest of the time. Maybe not in the same consistent spurt of, every week on TV, but I think the story is going to continue, and they're going to lean on this for a very, very long time. And what I was going to say before is it's very rare in the moment that wrestling fans or fans of anything appreciate things in the moment. And it's almost weird because a lot of these stories, the Austin McMahon, we all knew it was good, but you didn't know how great and legendary it was until you're looking at it from 30,000 feet. They don't even have the benefit of nostalgia yet. This is only going to grow stronger, and it might just have, it might be the biggest story, and especially with the WWE machine behind it. They're going to push it as long as all these guys can stay out of trouble and they're still within accepted realm of WWE.
Right.
That is, that's not a guarantee, as we've seen throughout wrestling, but this story is going to have 10 years from now, the nostalgia piece on it, where people are going to even make it better than it actually was. Because that's what happens with nostalgia, man. This story we're living through it in real time. And there's not enough words for it. I mean, of course we're not going to know how it ends until it ends, but I've been enjoying the ride. It's brought me back into WWE as far as my fandom goes. And that's saying a lot, because I was completely out for a very long time outside of big events.
Same. Outside of the big events, I was completely checked out. I think this has been done very, very well. If you'll allow me just for a moment, just to play fantasy booker.
Sure.
You talked about how in pro wrestling they love a sequel, and it's, we saw that DX. You got that original. You see there was three. The trilogy. You've got Shawn, H, China, and even Rick Rude, and then you go into the New Age Outlaws, X-Pac, and then they bring it back years later. Is there a possibility that it crumbles around Roman? Solo joins his brothers and turns on, and Roman's left with maybe just Heyman. He goes WrestleMania. He drops the title to Cody or Jey Uso or whoever, and Roman leaves, takes a hiatus. You have the Usos, Solo, and a surprise debuting Jacob Fatu kind of restart a new version of the bloodline without the tribal chief. And then 6 months to a year later, a returning babyface tribal chief Roman comes back to take back the bloodline. If you wanted to stretch this for 5 years, I feel like that's something you could do.
Very doable. Like
It's
this could
there.
be a decade-long thing we're looking at.
I mean, you could bring it, and the beauty of it, they haven't even brought in the Rikishis.
Yep.
They've managed to do this without really I mean, they brought in Sika
And
and
Alpha, yeah.
and Alpha in the very early beginning, but they've really they still have a lot of things they could do if they wanted to stretch this.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beautiful part about it is talking about blurring, real life and storyline. This is, their shoot family, so that's the other thing. And this tree goes well beyond. We didn't even touch on the Rock stuff too. Like Rock, I understand like the Rock is busy with other stuff, but he's another guy that they've been trying to get Roman out there with, and it just hasn't worked out. And LA seemed like the perfect stage for it, but that's still there. And you mentioned Rikishi and the younger generation of the Samoan dynasty, which is still out there. Guys that are 18 playing football right now, that they're eventually, they have a tendency to lean into wrestling with, how could you not, with The Rock and Yokozuna, and now Roman Reigns and the Usos, Rikishi, the Head Shrinkers, all those guys are just in this fold, man. It's just, it's fantastic.
It's fantastic. And last thing I'll say is that right there, you bringing up The Rock shows the power of this storyline, because when this storyline first started, myself included and a lot of fans said, if this storyline doesn't end with Roman versus The Rock, it's going to be an epic fail. I don't think you need The Rock at all anymore in this story. It's a benefit. If you can get him, it would add so much, and it would extend this storyline in a big, big way. But now it's almost like that's a cherry on top if you get it. If you don't, I think this story has been so good, it's managed to make us not even care if The Rock shows up or not. That's just an addition, a surprise, a fun little thing. But I don't think they need The Rock anymore. It's went beyond that.
So in the UK, we're going to have obviously the AEW portion of it in Wembley, but the London show setting the stage for the summer on July 1st, the Civil War of the Bloodline edition with the Usos versus Solo and Roman. As far as big match feel, I mean, this is going to feel epic. Can't wait for it. So, and the UK crowd is going to be singing, chanting, and loving it. But that's what to look forward to. And they're going to build it until then. We have 3 weeks, 2 weeks, something like that. And it's going to be awesome. But let's get into big story number 3.
Big story 3.
All right. Believe it or not, this is our go home edition of Forbidden Door in Toronto. AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling are giving us our second edition of this joint show. As we're sitting here on Monday, we only have 4 matches announced. Of course, the IWGP Championship on the line, Sonata versus Jungle Boy Jack Perry, the AEW World Championship, MJF against Hiroshi Tanahashi, the IWGP United States Championship, Kenny Omega defending against Will Ospreay, which is the rematch from Wrestle Kingdom earlier this year. And we have the dream match that we talked about only a few weeks ago on here. There's going to be a drought in this desert. Rain for anybody. Okada versus Bryan Danielson. 4 great matches. We'll get into breaking those down, but has me thinking about the talent on both sides, missing notably guys that should be involved on a big show as far as promoting your biggest stars. Naito, Ishii, Takagi, Takahashi, Jeff Cobb. You can even go the route with Desperado. On the AEW side, Jon Moxley, Claudio, the Bucks, Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, Sting, Darby Allin, FTR, Jay White, Wardlow. The list goes on as far as Punk as far as not being listed. So we've teased obviously Kenta versus Punk. They've teased Orange Cassidy versus Zack Sabre Jr. for the international title. They've teased Shibata versus Daniel Garcia, but that's probably gonna be held off for the Jersey pay-per-view for Death for Dishonor. Other than that, I mean, we have 4 matches, which you could put these 4 matches against any 4 matches to build a card around. Do you think it hurts the fact that we're on the go home edition of Wrestling Tonight and we only have 4 matches where we know we're going to have about 9, right? I mean, with the pre-show involved, do you think it hurts the card?
Absolutely not. Like, people are, all you need is Ospreay, Omega 2, and Danielson Okada, and everything else is just cherry on top. It really is. Like, those 2 matches, I mean, maybe other people aren't looking at it like this, but to me, those 2 matches are worth the price of admission alone.
100%.
I mean, that's honestly, you could take one of those matches off and I would still be hyped just getting one of those matches. So I think what we're going to see is this Wednesday on Dynamite. I think we're going to see Excalibur rattle off 6 matches for Forbidden Door. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff lock in. I wonder who makes the cut though. Last year there was several people that didn't make the cut due to injuries. Because Punk wasn't on it. He was hurt. Danielson was hurt. Omega was hurt.
Yeah.
And they've already gave us 2 of those big names that got left off last year, Omega and Danielson. So I think Moxley's going to be involved somehow. I wonder if they're going to do some sort of like mixed tag 6-man, 8-man with BCC lining up with a New Japan guy to take on the Bucks and a New Japan guy. I think that's a possibility, but because they have that storyline going on in AEW, so I don't know, but I don't think it hurts it at all, man. We're wanting those top 2 cards or those top 2 matches. Do you think those top 2 matches in the night, or do you think they open the show with one and close the show with one?
I don't know how you don't close the show with Omega versus Ospreay, but it seems like they'd want to close with a world championship match, but I don't believe either one of those matches deserves doing that. So I guess you cut the middle out and just do Okada Danielson, have them main event, because looking at Jungle Boy Sonata might be a good match on paper, but nobody in their right mind believes Jack Perry's going to take the title from Sonata. Not a main event. And MJF against Tanahashi, although Tanahashi's been a top star in New Japan for how long, he's no longer protected in booking. Clearly, he's not going to be beating MJF by that matter. Tanahashi, to me, was a easy political decision. We talk about super shows about guys that can get pinned. We talked about the All Together Now show with figuring out he was the guy that took the pin from Okada. So at this point, he's a guy he's a big enough name to put on MJF's mantle and say, I beat Tanahashi
100%.
But at this point, a drawing standpoint, I don't know how much interest there is for the casual fan that sees Tanahashi. This is only the second or third time we've seen him on AEW television. You're really putting in that it's just a defense for MJF. And a lot of the story is MJF didn't want to be there. So no matter who he was wrestling, that's the story. As far as the 2 big matches, had me thinking about, I don't think this is the end with Omega and Ospreay. And I think we might get Ospreay Omega again at Wembley. And we have the 3rd final match. So I think have Ospreay get the win here, Forbidden Door, maybe Takeshita cost him the match, because that's obvious, the low-hanging fruit there. In the middle ground, I guess you can have Omega versus Takeshita at All Out the weekend after, but then have Kenny versus Will Ospreay again on the biggest stage, the 3rd and final match, the rubber match. Enough time would be passed in between the 2 matches between end of June and late August. That's 2 months. I think that's probably the best bet as far as star power goes. Looking at the other, you mentioned party matches, tag matches. I think Sting and Darby is the easy one there. Team them up with somebody else and put them against LIJ with Suji and you want to throw them in there. But looking at just aesthetically, this is a Canadian show. Basically 13,000 people in the building going to be going crazy. We talk about the aesthetic of the environment. We've talked about the Puerto Rican crowd. We've talked about the crowd in Wembley, how wild they will be. We're going to talk about the Money in the Bank crowd in UK, that smaller arena. This crowd is going to be, they understand how important it is to show out for themselves, the crowd, because looking at this is usually, they usually are like, all right, we're going to Chicago. Forbidden Door last year was Chicago. They go to All Out for Chicago. That's usually our home. This is Toronto's chance to shine. It's a strong wrestling city as well that has, I wouldn't say go in the business for themselves, but we've seen WWE events in Toronto. We've seen other wrestling companies go to Toronto. It's a city laced with history that's going to be like, all right, we want to hold on to an event like this. And I think they're going to be ready and willing to really bring these matches to the next level. I mean, Okada Danielson has potential to be that Omega Danielson level where you're standing across the ring, everyone's chanting holy shit, and they present it in the same way. I mean, that the crowd needs to be the right crowd for, and I think this crowd is up for the challenge.
Yeah, and I think Toronto's a great wrestling city, and I think all great wrestling cities, they're great wrestling cities because the fan bases take pride in being great wrestling fans.
Right.
They're loud, they're into it. And I think that should be, hey, all you wrestling fans out there, if you get a show in your town and you're a super hot crowd and you show out and you look exciting on TV, those promoters are going to take note of that and be like, we got to come back here because the crowds are red hot. I mean, that's why these big cities, yeah, they're big markets, but if New York City was an absolute ghost town where no one showed up, and when they showed up, they were quiet, sat on their hands, they wouldn't go there as much as a Chicago, and vice versa, you know? And just to comment on Tanahashi and him, you know, not being so protected in New Japan, just to go back to that for a second, I'm with you. Neither him or the Jungle Boy Sonata match should main event. But I do think Tanahashi's in a position now. He's in the Chris Jericho spot where he is kind of teetering into that legend position where he can put guys over, he can lose, it doesn't hurt him at all. And I think that's what we're going to see. That I think MJF's going to go over on him. It's a good notch on his belt, you know. But yeah, I don't think it hurts Tanahashi the position he's in. I think he's just elevated to a point where now he's putting guys over and he's okay with that.
Agreed. And I think the other match we have on the docket, not official, of course, but CM Punk versus Kenta is out in the cards. And, you know, they've teased also the Zack Sabre Jr. and Samoa Joe match as well, which I think, again, is going to be on the ROH side of things. That's the other complicated part about this is you don't want to give away Shibata versus Daniel Garcia on the Forbidden Door paper, even though it sort of makes sense, even though Shibata is not tied with New Japan anymore. And you can give away the TV title match, but you have to sell a pay-per-view in July for ROH that doesn't have a lot of drawing cards outside of, you know, Claudio defending his title. So you have to make sure you fulfill those stories on paper here. But I think this is a work rate card that even if it comes together just the Wednesday before, which is this Wednesday, they're going to add a few matches. We saw how quickly they added the 4 matches. You know, we just got packages and they were just put together. And there's not much build you really need for Sonata versus Jungle Boy. And people were upset about that. But who else would be there that could potentially lose the Sonata? Jungle Boy was just in a main event program. I hope they do a good job. And we talk about this all the time on every wrestling show we're on. In the moment, in the match, just have me suspend belief for a second. Give me good near falls. Give me a moment where it feels like Jack Perry's going to walk away with the IWGP Championship and I'm happy. And I just want to immerse myself in the moment. MJF Tanahashi is going to be kind of surreal to see, especially where MJF was only a few years ago, him working Tanahashi. And I'm sure it's a big moment for him. And in kayfabe, he's going to poo-poo it, but I'm sure he's going to be fanboying a little bit because this is Tanahashi is the de facto John Cena of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's a huge star. And I don't know if AEW's done a good enough job presenting that, especially last year with the Jon Moxley match. And he was supposed to wrestle Punk, which would have been even bigger. I think Tanahashi's booking in that area was kind of convoluted, but everyone was like, what happened with Punk? He got hurt. I don't know what's going to happen with the title. I still would have put the goddamn AEW title as the interim on Tanahashi last year and just had him included. Like, why not? It wouldn't have done any harm.
Right.
Just added a really awesome name that you would have no opportunity to do that. We talked about even like Eddie Kingston. I just like that idea. But anyway, I think the card is going to be really good. I think there's going to be obviously matches that get put out there this Wednesday. And I'm really excited for it. I mean, take my money. This is the work rate card of the year.
Yeah, the matches are going to be incredible. I think there's 2 match of the year candidates on this card, obviously, but there's going to be other matches that could throw their hat in the ring. Obviously, Ospreay Omega, obviously Danielson Okada. I think the fun thing too is going to be with a match like this, you never really think about it because you're thinking of the in-ring, but there could be some fun surprises here too. I'm always up for the surprises. And this could be, you know, further layers towards Death Before Dishonor, further layers towards All In, further layers towards All Out. Like we are in AEW this year is doing a much better job of juggling all of the stuff because this is a crowded time of the year for them now. They're servicing New Japan for Forbidden Door. They've got ROH kind of looming, so they're doing a little bit of that. Plus, this big stadium show's now in the mix and All In. And I think last year it was a little more convoluted. They just got ROH. They had no TV for ROH, so it was a lot of programming was being put on our weekly AEW TV. But this year it feels a little more tight. I mean, it's obviously going to feel a little spread thin just because you're trying to do so much with so little, but with Collision and everything, I think next week will be we'll get to see the fallout of this. And I think they've done a good job with Forbidden Door now.
My biggest ask of them, and it's not official yet, but I want Naito in some capacity. It obviously won't be a built-up match. Naito wasn't on the show last year. If you want to throw him in that tag match, as I mentioned, Sting and Darby, maybe versus Tsuji and Naito could be potentially. I just want Naito. I want the AEW audience selfishly to be exposed to Naito. And if you're not familiar with him, check it out.
Awesome.
I mean, he had a great program with Chris Jericho a couple of years back. Naito, former IWGP champion. I think it kind of sucks because I think he would have been like a good opponent for MJF, but obviously you don't want him losing to Max in that capacity. But Naito MJF has a little more buzz to me than Tanahashi if you give it some time to build up. But there will be always Forbidden Door 3 down the line. So I just hope Naito gets his first taste of this. He's a huge star. He's a top 4 star in New Japan Pro Wrestling at the moment.
Yeah, he's one of their big guys. And I mean, I got to be honest, I'm just happy MJF's on the card. I never thought we'd see MJF on a Forbidden Door card.
Right.
It was shocking that he's working the event. So Naito, we got to get Naito. Naito's, I mean, I love the guy. He's great.
Yeah, tranquilo indeed. And we're going to get a lot of good wrestling. And this is one of the cards that kind of speaks for itself. And maybe Tony Khan is looking at it as like, doesn't need as much build because last year they had a pivot a million times. And I think Wednesday, if we get 3 more matches announced, that's 7 announced matches going into Sunday. And that's enough. And then you can also pop in some matches that are just kind of thrown together day of. And as long as you're having New Japan Pro Wrestling talent interact with AEW talent, people are going to be happy because that's the targeted audience that we're trying to get to watch the show. And right now you have them with Bryan Danielson, Okada, and Ospreay and Omega. You already got them in the door. The rest would just be, as you mentioned before, sprinkles on top of the Sunday.
Yeah. I think 2 marquee matches, boom, we're in. I mean, these aren't just marquee matches. These are dream matches. So
100%.
Yeah.
With that being said, let's get to quick hitters and talk about all the other smaller stories in wrestling. Quick hitters. All right, we have first quick hitter here. Pretty Deadly are next in line for a shot at the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships. Kit Wilson and Elton Prince feels like they just made their debut on WWE television, but they're going to be getting a shot at the tag titles very soon. So on Friday SmackDown, Pretty Deadly defeated the Brawling Brutes in a 6-team gauntlet to determine the next challengers for the tag titles. You can go through the list of the guys there, but it looks like they're going to be defending the tag titles, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, that is, on June 30th in London, England. The go-home show before the big show that we mentioned before, Money in the Bank. Pretty Deadly against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. They see a lot in these guys. I love what they were doing in NXT. I think they have a different dynamic to them that is not seen on either roster, Raw, SmackDown. They have a different flair to them, and personally love it. I think this is cool. Shows a little bit of depth of the tag titles. For so long, they were locked up in this Bloodline storyline, but we're seeing them extended. And I'm not saying Pretty Deadly is going to win, but it definitely would be cool to just like, all right, let's get the tag titles out of this main event scene and let them develop on their own. I don't know if Pretty Deadly is a team, but team like the Brawling Brutes or LWO or Pretty Deadly, those Street Profits, those teams are teams that would be well suited. All right, do we feel confident enough the tag titles have been elevated enough? Let's let the tag division go out and play with them.
No, I'm a big Pretty Deadly fan since NXT UK. I think they have like the it factor, like good in the ring, but they just have that it factor, airport test, whatever you want to call it. And being in London, if this was AEW, I would say they're going over. AEW loves the hometown people to get the win. We saw that with last night on Collision with Sky Blue getting the pin over the Outcast. So that was a big hometown thing. WWE doesn't really do the hometown service a whole lot. They're usually the other way. They put the guys under in their hometown. So I would love to see him win.
Make Regal kiss Vince's ass in England, Mustafa Ali losing in Chicago.
Right.
And the list goes on. But we also have another New Japan Pro Wrestling story here. John Moxley and El Desperado will be facing off at New Japan Strong Independence Day, which is going to be coming up on Tuesday, July 4th and Wednesday, July 5th. At night one of the event, Moxley is teaming with Homicide against Desperado and Jun Kasai. And then we also have a built-up match where they're going to have a no DQ match coming up with Final Death, as they're billing it, on July 5th. So 2 nights in a row, they're going to be working against each other. They had billed it as it will have one survivor. So the history between these guys is Moxley defeated Desperado in a no DQ match at the Music City Mayhem show back in July of 2022. And this will be the first time that New Japan Strong brand is holding shows in Japan. Usually this is an American platform. We have other matches on this card with TJP and Akira defending the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championships against Clark Connors and Dan Maloney. Eddie Kingston is going to be challenging for the Strong Openweight Championship against Kenta. But it looks like we're going to get 2 nights of Moxley Desperado. So going back to back, July 4th and July 5th, everyone's going to be eating hot dogs, lighting fireworks, a little sparkler, snow cone. John Moxley is going to be in a final death match in Japan, which I think is the most American thing he could probably think of.
Hell yeah, I love this. It's going to be a lot of fun to see Moxley just leaning more into that New Japan. He said he's got his travel visa. He's going to be back a lot. And I know a lot of people, the whole Moxley death match bleeding thing wears on some people. I hear the fans out there that complain about it, but dude, this is what the man wants to do.
Dude loves it.
This is his CZW coming out in him, where he got his early beginnings with him and Sami Callihan crushing it in the tag division back in the day. Like, this is where he comes from. And take away the criticism, oh, he always bleeds. Dude, we are seeing, in my opinion, a modern day Funk create his legacy. And he doesn't have to be the Danielson, the Omega, I think this perfectly fits into his vibe, his overall just aura of what kind of wrestler Moxley is. I like that he always wants to get down and dirty, bleed, do the nasty matches. I'm for it. I love Moxley. I love this version of Moxley. And, he's a modern day Terry Funk to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and he's allowed to scratch that itch too. Like, that's the best part about all of this, is that he's not confined. And I don't think Moxley would be happy to be confined, whether it's in GCW or, as I mentioned, he was supposed to do that Scrapper Mania tour. He does independent shows, and then also New Japan. He has different sort of personas he can tap into. They're all aligned with this one John Moxley character, but he can get into it like, it's like letting a dog out in the yard and let him run around, do laps, dude. Like, he needs to do this to get it out of his system.
Yes.
And I don't think that this has a place on AEW television all the time. I mean, obviously we see it when he's allowed to, but let him get it out. A death match against Desperado in New Japan, that audience is going to love it. And then if you want to get more of the more hardcore stuff, let him go to GCW. And I think at this point, he's earned the trust of Tony.
Yeah.
That he can just, I'm going to go out this and do this, and I'll show up on Wednesday ready to go. And
good God. Could you imagine if the last 4 years, this poor bastard was still Dean Ambrose? He would be the most miserable wrestler on the planet right now. Like, just let me do my thing. I think I love it because I can tell the guy is satisfied and happy. Like, it just comes across in his wrestling. And let's be honest, like, the last year or two of Dean Ambrose, you could tell that guy was absolutely miserable. So,
and deservedly so. They were giving him garbage, and maybe they would have found something good for him down the line, but I'm glad he was able to get out. And he took a lot like Chris Jericho, took a risk on an unknown entity, and he's benefiting from it. And he gets to live his best life and have the freedom to do the things he wants, and never has to want for money a day in his life, and doesn't have to work a day in his life. Really. I mean, it's hard stuff, but you could just tell he's passionate and loves what he's doing at this point.
Yeah. He's my kind of guy. He's my kind of guy. He rolls the dice. He has a belief in what he wants, what he likes, and he just wants to do that. And he doesn't want people boxing him in. I love that. I love Moxley. I'm happy to see him in New Japan in a death match with Desperado. I mean, final death match, whatever that is. Can't wait.
So the first time in 5 years, WWE is bringing a pay-per-view back to Pittsburgh. So we got Clash at the Castle this weekend, or the Labor Day weekend last year, but they're bringing back Payback 2023. It's going to be held at the PPG Paints Arena, where the Penguins play, on September 2nd. It's a Saturday of Labor Day weekend. Probably going to go against All Out, which would be the next day or something like that. They'll figure out a way to make that work. But historically, this is the first time Pittsburgh's hosting a WWE pay-per-view since Extreme Rules 2018. If you remember, Payback holds a big piece of this Roman Reigns lineage because Roman Reigns defeated Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman in a triple threat match to start his historic run that's now surpassed 1,000 days. So, though not officially announced, as I mentioned, AEW's All Out weekend will join, probably be on Sunday, September 3rd. But looking at WWE's upcoming schedule, we got Money in the Bank at the O2 Arena in London, England, which would be a big show. August 5th, SummerSlam at Ford Field, Detroit, Michigan football stadium where the Lions play. And now we got September 2nd, PBG or Bates Arena in Pittsburgh, which Pittsburgh has a great feel for. We talk about wrestling cities too. I think back at the Unforgiven 2001 match with Kurt Angle and
Big
Austin.
Kurt Angle City.
Yeah. And I think also Pittsburgh, it's weird they haven't been back. Maybe it has something to do with AEW running it frequently. We've seen them come back a few times. But as far as Payback goes, it's not like a tent pole type of event for them, but it does have history, and it has me believing that they want to bring back Payback because it's tied with Roman's reign. I think that's a big piece of what they did, and it was unintentional. I'm sure they would rather have it start at SummerSlam or Royal Rumble or whatever, but Payback is going to be remembered for that time where they're not going to talk about the guys that he beat. Maybe they'll show their highlights, whatever, if they're on the roster. It's not about that. It's about where it took place and where this historic run took place.
Yeah, it's also them, you know, I like a good, healthy counter programming competition going on between these companies. I think, you know, Tony gave that epic.
I'm not going to stand for it. That one.
I'm not going to stand for it. And I have a lot of money. You know, that whole press conference that was epic. And I don't look at it as, I mean, maybe some fans are going to pick and choose, but it's going to run Sunday for AEW because if it's not NFL season, they run their shit on Sundays. Like they've only did Saturday pay-per-views during NFL season. You know, Full Gear has always been traditionally a Saturday pay-per-view because Tony doesn't want to compete on NFL Sunday. But Payback on Saturday, All Out on Sunday, count me in. I'm not going to discredit either one. I'm pumped, and coming back to Pittsburgh, it'll be good to see WWE back there because in my mind, it was a Kurt Angle city. I always thought of Kurt Angle when I think Pittsburgh, but now it's kind of became Britsburg. Britt Baker is who I associate Pittsburgh with now. So it'll be fun to see WWE go back into there.
Great arena too. That's where the Penguins play. I've been there to watch the Islanders play. Nice arena. So enjoy the show there, guys. And Labor Day is becoming similar to Memorial Day, where it's another WrestleMania level weekend. It's not going to be as big as Clash at the Castle because it's not going to have the same feel, but 2 wrestling events on one weekend. What else can you ask for?
Yeah, Corey Graves, a big Pittsburgh native too, so I'm sure he'll be rocking commentary on Payback.
So AEW Battle of the Belts will live on despite the debut of the Collision show. So we had an interview with Post Wrestling Wednesday. Tony Khan was answering questions. He had said that it will continue. He was non-committal whether it will air on TNT or TBS or elsewhere. I mean, once the TV deal is finalized, but at this point, we've already kind of exhaustively talked about the lack of emphasis on Battle of the Belts. Maybe that changes, but we had 6 of them in their lineage. So the next one that happens will be number 7. And if last year's schedule holds, if I'm looking at it correctly, the next one should be this August. Nothing's been announced yet, but it seems like it'll be tied into these tapings with Collision, ROH, Rampage, all the stuff that they have on deck. But they need to put emphasis on this. This is not, if this was supposed to be their Clash of Champions, it's just not. We can't have meaningless matches, and maybe they find a way to make it meaningful. But until then, I don't really care that it's happening. So unless you make me care, it's going to be one of those things. It's just content for the sake of content. And maybe lucky number 7 will bear some good moments. But as of now, there's been just few and far between as far as, you know, the Hangman versus Adam Cole match, or there's only been small moments where
2 title changes, I think, and they both involve Sammy Guevara, I believe.
Right. I think that was the one where Cody and Sammy were supposed to be Cody, Sammy, and I think Cody couldn't be there, right?
Right. I think they crowned an interim or something. Like he had COVID, Cody had COVID or something. I get that they try to wrap this into a taping with a Rampage or a Dynamite. However, they tape it after. And dude, I don't know how they make this important, but making it feel like its own show, you know, how Collision gave us a different stage. Something like that would be great. I would even love them to go back with do the ramp straight to the ring like Clash, have the AEW sign off kiltered like the WCW sign, have the sparkly curtains in the background, like go full retro to make me buy in. Give us some meaningful storyline shot here, not just matches, not just, and do some big title changes. I think that would help. The big thing, I know we always kind of compare this to Clash of the Champions, all of us. And I think that's because AEW kind of put that out there. Quarterly show, big deal. It's 1 hour versus the 2 hour that Clash was. But the reason Clash was so big, especially the really, really good Clash of the Champions episodes early on, the ones that got me hooked in the early 90s, 90, 91, 92, the reason those were so big is because there wasn't a Nitro. I mean, you had Saturday Night, but a lot of those matches you saw in WCW Pro, WCW Power Hour, all of these kind of peripheral shows, is most of those matches were squash matches.
Right.
And Clash acted as like the tentpole event where we're going to get big matches here. Now with there being the Dynamites, the Collisions, where you're getting week to week storytelling, they're not leaning like that anymore. I feel it, but you should make it a big deal, because if you remember, once Nitro started in 95, I believe, Clash kind of took a dump, man. It kind of like they got progressively less and less special. So I think having a big weekly live show took away the heat of Clash. And I think we're still feeling that now with these live weekly wrestling shows take the specialness away from these tentpole quarterly shows. And that needs to be kind of looked at from Tony and the creative team and being like, okay, we need these to feel special too. They need to feel almost bigger. If it's a quarterly show once a quarter, you have to make it feel like a big deal. And they haven't done that yet.
Yeah, very good point. Speaking of AEW, they terminated BJ Whitmer, his deal with them. He's obviously producer on their end, former ROH tag champion. Colton and I talked extensively about this on Honor Society. The accusations are damning: domestic abuse, burglary charges, and
strangulation.
Some gnarly stuff. And we were saying before, if on Honor Society, if he is guilty of this, good riddance. And seems like the evidence is damning against him. He was a guy who's been featured during the Pure matches as a judge. He was a producer. Colton and I, at fear of getting into a longer conversation about the production side of it, but seems like they've kind of known this was happening. The arrest happened, I think, early June 4th, something around there. But it seems like they probably knew things were down the pike for this, because they started figuring out a way. We heard Dax Harwood was going to have a hand in creative. Bryan Danielson. They're finding different people to bring in, put in different slots. Maybe they knew this was happening, and it's creating an opening elsewhere, because BJ Whitmer, did what he did. And horrible. And I do want to say I appreciate AEW reaching out to the people that were affected by this. Very classy on their end. And immediately, no thought about it, got rid of them, and
kudos.
Move on from there. Kudos for them. They had no hesitation, which sometimes organizations do. I think that tells me a lot, that there's a lot of strength behind these accusations, and he's probably going to see some jail time.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been kind of critical of WWE and the way they've handled this Matt Riddle situation. Like, Matt Riddle's been accused and there's checkered past and all of this, but it's not as concrete as this. You get arrested for this. You get the accusations, the Boone County, Kentucky Sheriff's Department shows up, arrests you on these charges. Dude, shit can him immediately. Get him out of there. Nothing worse than domestic, like, come on, one burglary, then you're beating up on a woman. Kudos to AEW for not being like, let's wait until the reports come out. They just got rid of him. I think that's the best way to do it.
And we were talking about this on the honor side. This stone's throw away from where Colton at mullet.mania, guys, follow him on Instagram. He's entering a mullet contest. Going to be sharing some professional photos.
Yeah.
A stone throw away from him. And I was like, did anything, because we all have local news in our area, and ours is News 12 for Long Island and like the metro area for the city. But he's like, no, I didn't see anything about this, which it caught him by surprise when he saw it on our news sheet when we were going over Honor Society. And yeah, it seems like AEW had their finger on the pulse. Get rid of this. It's not good press. We don't want it. He's not worth the issue. And he's clearly has some things he needs to work through and be held accountable for. So, like I said, well done by AEW's leadership staff.
Yeah, things like this, zero tolerance, in my opinion. You're beating up on women. You're doing, get rid of them. Anything of this nature, this severity, you have to just cut them loose.
So we also had an interview with the Butcher. He was on John Nason's Punch Out show. He was talking about his booking in AEW, just on the build up to getting there. And it was nice to hear from Butcher, obviously one half of Butcher and the Blade. Let you take the lead on this. I'm not sure if you listened to this. You're the one put the story in here, but tell me a little bit about Butcher's perspective on things.
I just thought this was interesting because this was prior to them coming in. And, they weren't big stars on the independents, but I remember, when AEW first started, I loved their look. In the beginning, people forget, in the beginning of AEW, there was this push amongst fans of like, oh, who's the new indie guy they're going to get? Like, who are they getting? And me and Sneed, I had saw a promo with Butcher and the Blade, and their look was they had a look, a vibe, and I'm like, dude, they need to get these guys in the tag division. And then when we got that segment with Cody in the ring, and Blade cuts the hole out of the ring and they come out. I know the fans, when that happened, were silent because no one knew who they were, but I knew who they were. So me and Sneed were losing our shit, but it was fun to see Butcher's perspective on how they almost didn't come to AEW. Like, they had gotten, he's quoted as saying, we had gotten offers from ROH to come in and win the trios belts with Tyler Bateman, who we know as someone who was involved with the Righteous, with Vincent and Dutch. Mm-hmm. And he says, that was 2 weeks before we got the AEW offer. It was supposed to be us versus Brody King, Marty Scurll, and the Frankenstein guy, PCO. Wow. It seems like another time period, man. Marty Scurll, another time.
Who's head of creative then too? ROH.
Yeah.
People forget he got the amount of money that Sinclair gave Scurll. That's a whole different conversation.
He had the book. Book, man. And they kept him. That's the way they kept him, because AEW had him on their radar. What a different. I love Scurll. Regardless of what happened, I was a big fan of the villain.
He was just as big as all of them. We could do a hypothetical.
Being the elite, he was an integral part.
He would have been one of the biggest stars, and he'd be tied in easily with these guys. But
100%. And he said we were supposed to win when they came in, beat those guys, win the 6-man titles. ROH had sent the contract offers, but then the shows that they had offered us got canceled due to COVID. And they were like, this is bad. I remember telling Jesse, meaning the Blade, this is an omen, man. We've got to run from this. This is a bad sign. And we did. We stuck to our guns, didn't sign anything. And I remember being at the gym and getting a call from Cody Rhodes asking if we wanted to come in and do AEW. It blew my mind. It's just sometimes, man, I thought it was a good little peek into wrestling of like, when you get those contract offers, it really is. It could go one or two ways. If they would have went to ROH, it could have totally sent them down another path, but everything worked out. I'm a big fan. I know they are essentially just not enhancement talent, but they haven't won the big belt.
Yeah.
But I do think they're a fun tag team in that division that I enjoy.
Absolutely. And shout out to Blade with the best tan in all of professional wrestling. Only rivals
incredible
Hulk Hogan. So
incredible tan.
Shout out to that tan, but definitely great anecdotes about just the opening one door, leaving one door closed, and kind of rabbit hole you fall into with every choice you make has a different decision and effect in your life. So
it was fun too, because that was a picture into the time of AEW where Cody fans were blowing him up on Twitter all the time of, sign this guy, Cody.
Get
sign
War
this
Horse.
Guy.
Get War Horse.
Exactly. So, guys, I did it. Getting Butcher and the Blade was from Twitter fans blowing him up. getting that Warhorse Open challenge, that was from fans asking for it. So it was just a fun look back to an era of AEW that was a great time.
So I know we don't have a bumper for it, but we should at this point. And as a staple in our show here for Wrestling Tonight, WWE's motion to dismiss MLW's lawsuit was denied by a district judge in San Jose, California. MLW's amended antitrust lawsuit, which means proceedings will continue. So Edward Avila was the guy who is the judge overseeing this. He disagreed with several points in WWE's motion, including their stance that wrestling is an interchangeable programming option for broadcasters, and that, quote, the court finds that MLW has sufficiently pleaded circumstantial evidence of WWE's monopoly power, which has a lot here. So if we go through the timeline of events, and if you guys have been with us since we started the show back in January, we hopped in probably the third month in, but back in March 2022, WWE files a motion to dismiss the initial lawsuit that was brought on. December 2022, MLW lawsuit moves forward, trial date to be determined. When we started the show here, January 2023, WWE had filed a protective motion in the MLW lawsuit. In February, WWE put another motion out there to dismiss it. The judge gives MLW an option to file an amended lawsuit. And then we go all the way down to here, June 2023. The judge denies it. Seems like they're going to court. And this is all based on WWE's monopolization on wrestling at large, by whether it be the NBC Universal and Fox wielding power and trying to figure out what happens with the TV rights on MLW side being stunted as far as growth. MLW essentially is claiming that WWE has violated what's called the Sherman Act, which the motion to dismiss was attempting to argue otherwise. And essentially this is just trying to set precedent for other wrestling companies not to be bullied by WWE. And you have to at least give them credit, Court Bauer, that is, for sticking to his guns, where he might exhaust all of his funds doing this unless they wind up winning huge financially and they find this could be something that puts MLW out. But I think they have a greater cause in mind that they're never going to be able to prosper if this continues to happen. So they might as well go all in and hold WWE to task.
Yeah, it's for the greater good. I feel like you're this deep in. I mean, the volleys back and forth. This has been like the most epic pro wrestling promotion tennis match of all time. Because, like you said, file to dismiss. It's this back. They file the amended lawsuit. WWE moves to get it dismissed. It doesn't get dismissed. It's this back and forth game that's been happening since 2022. So, it's a lot of fun to watch. I think that's why we're tracking it. And like you said, the bigger picture, this is a big deal. If MLW sticks to its guns and wins something out of this is huge for pro wrestling.
Absolutely. So we also had a big story here, and Jimmy Jacobs, friend of the tavern, did an Honor Society cameo for our entrance here. But Jimmy Jacobs left Impact Wrestling. He signed with AEW in a creative backstage role. This is what I kind of alluded to before with the BJ Whitmer news, where maybe them knowing things prior to becoming public. But Dave Meltzer confirmed that Jacobs left Impact Wrestling, where he's been part of the creative team, to join AEW. So he was in Washington, D.C. for Dynamite as part of the creative team. Thing I want to just note here is, as far as Impact goes, we've been lauding him with praise and well-deserved, and he's been a huge part of that. He's been a member of Impact's creative team since 2017. He's had a cup of coffee with WWE's creative team for about 2 years. He was fired from WWE of taking pictures with members of the Bull Club, if you guys remember that, with an angle invading at Raw for the Being the Elite show, which I forgot that happened. But when I was looking through the history of Jimmy Jacobs, that ended his time there, which benefited Impact. The fact that they were able to get a guy that WWE looked at as a great, strong, creative mind and had him in their fold from 2017 until now. And we've seen AEW try to put their team together, trying to put the circle of trust, or all the knowledgeable guys in wrestling. We have Bryan Danielson, we confirm. We're going to talk about Dax Harwood getting a hand of creative. But Jimmy Jacobs is another guy. He's seen different iterations of wrestling. It's just a different mindset, a different perspective, and they're better for it. And I think if you look at Impact's product from 2017 on and where it's at now, Jimmy Jacobs had a huge hand in that. You can't get credit for it all. It's a team effort, but Jimmy Jacobs losing Impact, that hurts them, but helps AEW.
Yeah. And Jimmy's, in Impact, he leaned into a little more of the over the top
theatrical stuff. Yeah.
Theatrical stuff, which I think AEW needs a little bit of that every now and then. And I think hopefully he can bring some of those ideas to the table. You mentioned his run in WWE. I'm wanting to say he was one of the main writers for Jericho during the list. During that whole run, he was one of the main guys in there. I think it's good. I love tracking who AEW is bringing in to the behind the scenes crew, the creative guys. I think it's fun to follow that.
So speaking of bringing people back in, Jimmy Jacobs might have ended his time in WWE, but we have another familiar face coming in. Well-deserved, worst-kept secret kind of here. Carlito, 44 years old, apparently signed a new contract with WWE. If you guys know the history, he worked from WWE from 2003 to 2010 on his first night, winning the U.S. title from John Cena. He got a major push as a heel, but I think this really came to fruition with the Puerto Rico pay-per-view Backlash, where he got a huge pop during the Priest and Bad Bunny match. That clearly was the precipice for giving him the job. He looks absolutely amazing. He was at House of Glory this weekend wrestling Matt Cardona, but this all kind of came to light with promoter Devin Nicholson saying that he had been called by Carlito that he's pulling out of the 7/15 independent date because he had just signed with WWE and couldn't do the date. So Devin Nicholson, not keeping anything a secret, this blew up, and Carlito addressed it at the House of Glory show. I don't think he actually said flat out that he signed with WWE, but he pretty much said the rumors are true. And I think he had said it tongue in cheek. I taught Vikingo all of his moves. I think that's what he had said, but clear as day, he's coming back to WWE. Well-deserved, dude, as far as like, even if it's a Legends contract, he looks fantastic, better than ever. Yeah. And we'll see what happens. I mean, at the very least, we'll get some new Carlito figures too.
Yeah.
And his run throughout that mid-card run, very popular wrestler.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for it.
I'm excited for it. He looks great. They brought him back at the Rumble, and I think a lot of people thought he was going to come back after that because he looked so good and he got.
I forgot he was at the Rumble. Honestly, yeah.
And I remember there was a lot of like, oh, he signed, and then something he was supposed to be on a Raw, and he wasn't there, and it was reported that he was, or something like. But the Puerto Rico pay-per-view put him over. I think that hopefully that made them think of a storyline for him, and they have something in mind meaningful that he can come into. I am always a little leery of WWE dipping into their past with guys because very rarely do they give guys who have been gone a long time and bring them back something really, really big to latch onto. I hope he doesn't just start doing the Matt Hardy do the job brother every week.
Right.
I would like to see him in a competitive role. I think Triple H probably is better at handling that than Vince was, but we'll see. I'm hopeful. I like having Carlito back on our weekly TV. I hope they handle it right, and I hope he has something fun in store for the fans.
So we also, on WWE side, they are looking to bring in a younger superstar into the fold. Triple H and Shawn Michaels had a lot of interest in who we know as Hook. So this was reported by Better Wrestling Experience about Triple H wanting to sign Hook, who's 24 years old, so just at the beginning of his wrestling career. I think he probably had his best match as of date, the Dynamite 2 weeks ago. I think it was in Colorado where he had that bloody match, which was
the
awesome.
Texas Tornado match.
Yeah, that was probably his best match, long form. We've only seen him really in squash matches, tag matches, but he's still learning the craft. But as far as presence, and we talk about his, legacy, Taz is his dad, a second generation roots, connection with the fans, his look. I think he really kind of taps into like this TikTok generation of looks like a lot of the younger generation that maybe doesn't resonate so much with the older fans, but there's something to be said about that because you got to tap into the new fan base and find a way to keep them. And maybe Hook is a guy who resonates, but he's been booked pretty strong on AEW, to say the least. He's undefeated in 33 singles matches and tag team multi-man matches. He only made his debut back in 2021, end of the year, December. He was obviously involved with the heel faction. He's had some intermittent spurts of not being on TV, but I think everyone sees the potential in Hook, the legacy in Hook, and then you can bill him as Taz's son. And I wouldn't say he's the best in the ring, but I think he's one of those guys, and people are looking at this AEW contract stuff, and we talked bigger picture with the elite big names, Hangman, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega. This might be an undercard guy that is going to be leaving for greener pastures, and maybe his dad's going to tell him that's what you should do. So I think that the quote from Better Wrestling Experience was that he is the easiest catch for WWE right now. And maybe when their hiring freeze is over, when all this deal is set up with Endeavor, that they can actually start signing people, a lot of people, with their books are all, and it might be to that point at this point with Carlito obviously getting the rub here. It seems like Hook probably could go if they want him, and I don't think AEW is going to be. They're going to offer him a deal, but I don't think AEW has to sort out who's the priority, and there's a lot of other guys that jump ahead of Hook.
Yeah, I think this is somebody that Triple H and Shawn Michaels would be interested in. Like you said, TikTok generation, has a look, has a pedigree with Taz being his dad. I call bullshit on some of this report, though. I'm like, who? Because there was within this report, it says Hook's father, AEW commentator Taz, also reportedly wants his son in WWE, likely for obvious reasons such as exposure and experience. Where's the report? Who said this? Who did Taz say this to? No, like, just reading the tea leaves of how Taz is in direct quotes,
brother.
And yeah, like what, like when the vibe of Taz that I get when he responds to people on Twitter and things like that is he seems pretty not against WWE, but he's a company guy. It's hard for me to believe that he's out there telling him, yeah, you need to leave and go over there. I mean, he wants the best for his son money-wise, and obviously PC is going to give you a solid foundation, maybe box you in a little bit in your style, but I mean, I could see him wanting the best for his son, and WWE, obviously, if they offer a big money payday, I get it, but it just seems kind of disingenuous, like, to make a report where Taz reportedly wants his son in WWE. Where's that coming from? Where's the proof of that? Better wrestling experience? What is this site? I've never heard of you. Like, this report, like Triple H and Shawn Michaels wanting Hook. Okay, that seems reasonable. But then everything else in this report, I'm just like, it smells of shit to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way Taz was presented in WWE, WWF, I mean, maybe a quick payday for sure.
Right.
But
it just seems like he's always been I don't want to say disgruntled, but he has been very critical of the way his time there has been, the way they do certain people. Just read previous Taz interviews about how everything went down, his take on it. He's very much he puts me in the mind of like that Punk guy, the anti-establishment. I like being in this company and fighting the man. Taz has that attitude. He always has. Even that's what the FTW title was built out of.
Right.
And for him to be like working for a company, and him and Tony are pretty tight from all reports, from what Taz says, from what Tony says, it just seems weird that he would be like, yeah, leave here and go over there. AEW's given his son a shot and put him on a major stage, got him an Action Bronson song, really put a lot into him, and he's just going to be like, yeah, leave here. I don't know. Taz seems like a guy based on loyalty. It smells of like a WWE mark trying to paint another picture. That's what I get. That's the vibe I get from the report.
I mean, it's a fair criticism for sure. I mean, the entrance seems obvious, and you can make a report from that and start adding things that fit the narrative of that. I agree with you, but I think I wouldn't be shocked to see Hook going, but I think the Taz part of him being the one encouraging,
pushing his son.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked. It's just, if I'm Triple H and Shawn Michaels and I'm looking over at the AEW roster and the guys I really want to single out and go after, I'm looking at the Jades and the Wardlows. I'm not looking at Hook. I mean,
No, agreed. But let's get to Dave's raves and talk about his match of the week and performer of the week.
Dave raves.
All right, here we are from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. It was jam-packed this week with a lot of Collision preview, talking about everything happening on Saturday night, breaking down the CM Punk stuff. But as far as the match of the week goes, it was that 6-man tag match that we talked about last week at All Together Now, New Japan, All Japan, and Pro Wrestling Noah getting together and making everything happen. Okada, Ayagi, and Keno against Tanahashi, Kento Miyahara, and Kaido Kiyomiya. And this match, as far as, and I clipped what he had wrote about this match. He gave it 4.5 stars, which I felt like he was going to give 5 based on how he was speaking about it. just talk about the significance of Okada and Kiyomiya being in the ring and then building towards it. They were kept apart until 8 minutes into the match when both tagged in. Okada then tagged out. They went back and forth. The crowd was really eating this up. We mentioned last week that Tanahashi was the one that took the pin after the Rainmaker. Easy decision, because you look at these joint shows, promotional shows, you want kind of promotion on promotion damage. You don't want to have anyone looking stronger. And Kato Kiyomiya, like, he's been built up strong. And I think the fact that they saw New Japan's top star against All Japan's top star was a draw for this card. And we talked about easy booking, kind of softball level stuff with these 6-man tag matches, but has me sort of spinning my wheels about future endeavors with, Impact, AEW, WWE potentially getting together in some capacity. And this is the blueprint of how you can do it and do it safe. And everybody walked out smelling like roses. So his performer of the week was Okada. He thought Okada was a little more presentation wise. The edge on Okada, that's what I'm really interested to see about this Danielson match. He's had this edge that he's had since that Kiyomiya original feud. It's next level at this point. So I can't wait to see and Bryan Danielson's going to bring the fire, and the two of them are going to go out there. It's not the same old Okada who is just happy to be there. Of course, he always lays his shit in, but there's a different edge to him now that this Kato Kiyomiya feud has brought out of him. And then Bryan Danielson, I feel like they're going to pour some gasoline on the fire, and it's going to be off to the races. It's awesome.
Not only does Okada have a different edge from the Kiyomiya stuff, he's also reached this level. It's like his character is on another. It's reached this level now where when someone gets a shot on him or he takes a bump, the crowd loses their shit.
Right.
Like he's almost reached this untouchable level where when he's bumping for a guy now, it means something. I mean, it really, like, that crowd really looks at him as the top of the mountain, and I think he's really owning that. So that makes me highly interested to see when he's staring across at Danielson, because the booking of that match, man, I can't wait to see how they do it. I can't wait to see who wins. I think Danielson is a guy who's always happy to put someone over.
Right.
It's going to be very interesting going into that match to see the level of just tension. I always go back to the match I always kind of cite in a situation like this is there's two. There's Rock Hogan, when they're staring each other down, the pressure, the big moment feel you got in that just stare down before they even touched. And more recently, Danielson Omega at Arthur Ashe. When they were staring and they ring the bell and the crowd just explodes and they're kind of laughing at each other across the ring like they couldn't believe the moment they were in. I think we're going to get something like that when Okada and Danielson, that bell rings. It's going to be like that.
So before we move to the week ahead, I have to take the low-hanging fruit and just take a shot at Punk here. Okada did a savage elbow in this match that was textbook, would make Randy Savage proud. While if you look at Punk's elbow, it never was good. It never was a good elbow. Last night was a horrible elbow drop. So taking a shot there. I felt like it's a fair shot.
It's his elbow's always been sloppy. A running elbow right now that's climbing up my rankings of elbows, that MJF elbow off the top onto the table.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I love his form with that elbow. It's becoming a staple. He's done it twice now, and I love that. I love that move for MJF.
Yeah, Okada doing the elbow is not usually in his repertoire, but the fact he brought it out and, man, got some height on it. Punk's got to spring a little bit up to get up, because it's always been grounded like there's lead in his ass, but last night was, got to get some hops on it. But anyway, let's get to the week ahead.
The week ahead.
All right, we got a big week of wrestling ahead. Let's start with Monday night on Raw. We have the return of Logan Paul. We have Seth Rollins defending the World Heavyweight Championship in an open challenge, and we have Shinsuke Nakamura versus Bronson Reed. So some good matches here. This is supposed to, I guess, maybe get some shine on Shinsuke moving into the men's Money in the Bank and probably getting the W here over a formidable Bronson Reed. decent Raw on tap here. I don't know who's going to be challenging Seth Rollins. We saw Seth appear on NXT in a vignette. Maybe it's going to be Braun Breaker, but we don't know yet. And I think the open challenge has been just cool because we're seeing it defended and see if we can gain some steam behind it.
Yeah, I love this. I hope it's not Braun Breaker. I hope because he's already set at Gold Rush, right, to defend against.
Oh, correct. You're absolutely right. Yep.
So I love that he's really building this title through defenses, and I'm excited to see what Logan Paul does. Let's see where he's going.
So speaking of NXT Gold Rush on Tuesday, the World Heavyweight Championship, Seth Rollins defending against Braun Breaker. We have a North American Championship match, Wesley defending against Tyler Bate. Mustafa Ali is going to be the special ref here. We have an NXT Tag Team title number one contenders three-way match, Tank Ledger and Hank Walker versus Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen versus Idris Inoff and Malik Blade. And of course, Dana Brooke versus Cora Jade to round it off for these matches here. NXT might pop a rating Seth Rollins here on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very, very good gauge of how big of a draw Seth is.
True.
You know, like if they pop a big rating, there you go. And I think this Mustafa Ali special referee, I think there's going to be an angle shot where Ali is going to be getting that North American Championship feud coming out of this match, I believe.
On Wednesday, we have two matches announced. The Hardys versus the Guns. I'm sure we're going to get more Forbidden Door build. And we're going to have Orange Cassidy and Shibata taking on Zack Sabre Jr. and Daniel Garcia. So that's it for Dynamite as we speak. So not sure what else is happening, but you have to know we're going to get more Forbidden Door matches announced. They have to.
Oh, yeah. I thought I saw Jericho. I think there's a Jericho match that just got announced with Ishii.
Nice.
Not him and Ishii. It's Jericho tagging with Ishii and someone else against, but I can't remember the matchups, but it's going to be this is the final build to Forbidden Door. So we're going to get a lot of stuff.
We also have an Impact. Sami Callihan, Jay Christ, and Madman Fulton are taking on Brian Myers and the Good Hands, which is Jason Hotch and John Schuyler. The Design, Con and Angels versus John Gresham and Mike Bailey. Taylor Wilde versus Killer Kelly. And then we have a tag match, Bully Ray and Steve Macklin versus Eddie Edwards and Frankie Kazarian, who we didn't include it in the news here, but Frankie Kazarian is very critical of AEW. It's about the booking and not liking the direction of the company. We'll maybe talk about it next week if there's more to it, but some good stuff on Impact.
I mean, I can't fault Frankie for the time that he was there. He was getting left in the dust. I thought they dropped the ball on the Elite Hunter situation. That could have been a bigger deal for him. I think Frankie had some bang up matches in AEW. I believe was he the first guy to face Adam Cole? There was someone, he welcomed a wrestler into the company with a match. And I remember, it was Christian. It was Christian's first match. It was a bomb ass match. My only take on the Impact show coming up, guys, keep your eye on the Good Hands. Jason Hotch and John Schuyler. They had a match with the ABC, Chris Bay and Ace Austin. It was a banger match. If you're fans of FTR, I think you'll like the Good Hands. Jason Hotch and John Schuyler, friend of the show. Go back in our archives. We spoke with him. He came up with Dax and Cash on the North Carolina independent scene. They're just solid ass workers. I'm a big fan of the Good Hands.
So just for Impact as well, I just want to address the criticism on Impact that Tom was dropping on the AEW wrap-up show, dropping some heat on Impact. And I think people in the comments are giving him shit. Freems gave him some shit, but I want to put it on blast here. If you're not watching Impact, you don't know what you're doing. And Impact has been quality. I think he admitted he hasn't watched it, so I think he backtracked it, but the criticism
what was the heat he was giving it? I didn't hear it.
That it sucks. Nobody watches Impact, which I was like, I immediately took not offense to it, but I was like, dude, Impact has been the most consistent product out of all the promotions. If you have not been watching Impact, it's appointment TV for me at this point. So if anyone starts disparaging Impact, I mean, they have been doing the work of consistent bookers with smart creative minds and pushing young talent. Can't say enough good things about Impact. So
they're the most consistent wrestling show of any.
Yes.
In my opinion, there's no peak. The peaks and valleys in WWE and AEW are, there's a lot of peaks and valleys. Impact's just a steady show, and they've got a great roster. And I think they're showing a good storyline future, like the things they're setting up. And we called it, Ace, last week. about Alex Shelley getting that title, we're going to see a flip on Nick Aldis. And what happened on the last episode of Impact?
Oh yeah.
His true colors.
Yep.
Heel Nick Aldis heading into Slammiversary. So I'm pumped.
I'm selfishly rooting for Shelley to retain that title at Slammiversary, and I also want Sabin to retain. I want to be ring announcing for Alex Shelley, the current Impact champion, when they come to Remarkable Wrestling in September.
Absolutely.
For Remarkable Wrestling presents on the night. So I'm hoping they're champs by then, but he's got a tough task ahead of him with Nick Aldis. On Thursday night as well, we have one match announced: Chicago Street Fight for the Women's Championship, Athena versus Kiera Hogan. There'll be more matches, obviously. I think they taped last night, so I could have looked them up, but I try to avoid spoilers so I can go in fresh for Honor Society with Colton. You guys can check us out, breaking it down, about an hour and a half of great ROH conversation. I appreciate all the support. So it should be a good match. Athena's run as women's champion has been top notch.
Yeah, I love Athena. I like that Kiera Hogan's getting some love on the ROH brand, because when she was in Impact, Kiera Hogan was a big deal. She came over. I think she got lost in the shuffle of just all the people on the roster in AEW. But I'm a big fan of Kiera Hogan. You know, she was one of the baddies with Jade for a while. I like they pulled her out of that, and she's going one-on-one with Athena in this Chicago Street Fight. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, Colton and I talk about it all the time, so you guys can check out further conversation about it. But we always say week after week, they're the only promotion right now that are putting 3 to 4 women's matches on there and building up the women's division. It's really, it's a very rich, talented division for ROH. Young talent that is completely getting this rub off Athena. Talk about the mini program with Sky Blue, now this Kiera Hogan program, and then go down the list of the women that, you know, we saw her as well. Trisha Dora on Dynamite.
Trisha Dora is great.
She's been fantastic. Lady Frost, who's also is where Willow Nightingale, a great women's division that you could put next to any women's division, even rival it against AEW's women's division, which is bogged down by the Outcast story. There's a lot more freedom on the ROH side to tell meaningful stories with women's matches that aren't just about the championship. They're having one-off matches that are really building towards something. And I don't want ROH to be built as this like this farm system to like an NXT function, but it might just by accident function that way, because a lot of these women, like you mentioned, Kiera Hogan, Sky Blue, they're getting the opportunities they weren't getting on AEW television, and they're better for it. Kiera Hogan and Sky Blue. We saw Sky Blue last night on Collision. I think she's really benefited from working a meaningful program, short, you know, be it very short with Athena. The confidence, the in-ring work has gotten to a next level where if you weren't watching ROH, you're probably like, how much does she improve from time to time? She was a different wrestler last night.
Right. Yeah. I think you're seeing the growth. And I love that ROH is kind of a place where young talent gets the chance to really have meaningful matches, you know, like
100%.
they're getting time, and ROH is a straight wrestling show. And I like that about it. I like that they have their storylines, but it's keeping in the tradition of what Ring of Honor was always about.
On Friday, we have SmackDown, some matches announced. The WWE and NXT Women's Tag Team Championship unification match. The team of Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler, the current WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, against Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, the NXT Women's Championship. We also have Bayley versus Shotzi in a spot in Women's Money in the Bank ladder match on the line. And then Cameron Grimes versus Baron Corbin. Some good stuff here. Interested to see how they function with these tag titles. If they're going to let them live on NXT, are they going to float? My guess is that they're going to go back to NXT and they're going to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting. I'm with you. Like, are they going to go to NXT? Are they going to float? WWE doesn't seem to let titles float that much, so that would be shocking. I think you're probably right. They're probably going to send it back to NXT, but we'll see.
And we have Collision next week. No matches announced yet. We may not have a lot of matches announced prior, because I think they're going to wait until Wednesday to announce matches. So we're going to miss that cycle. Of course, tune in at 8:00 Eastern for AEW Collision. Maybe they'll have some programs, meaningful matches announced in advance. But for right now, we're just going to tune in because you're tuning in until we get more consistent announcements of matches where we know at certain points of the week what matches Dynamite's going to be having. I'm sure Collision will be the same way.
Yeah, that made me think of another match that was announced for Dynamite this week that I totally forgot about. Mark Briscoe, Jeff Jarrett in a concession stand.
Oh, wow.
Fight.
Here we go.
Like, that's an old school Memphis. Supposedly the birth of hardcore was the concession stand matches in Memphis wrestling. So Mark Briscoe, Jeff Jarrett, let's go.
and we preview Forbidden Door. So go back to the big story number 3. We don't have to, that's going to be this Sunday. So good stuff with AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. And quickly, just going to run down the card we have for Money in the Bank. As we mentioned before at length, the Bloodline Civil War tag match, the Usos versus Solo Sikoa and Roman Reigns. We have the World Heavyweight Championship match on deck, Finn Balor versus Seth Rollins. Or if Seth Rollins loses his title in the open challenge tonight, probably not. The men's Money in the Bank ladder match, LA Knight versus Butch versus Santos Escobar versus Ricochet versus Shinsuke Nakamura versus Damian Priest. On the women's side of things, Io Sky versus Bayley versus Becky Lynch versus Lena Vega versus Zoe Stark versus whoever wins, Bayley versus Shotzi in that SmackDown match on Friday. And as of right now, we have Triple Mania coming up on 7/15. We'll preview that going forward. It's going to be main evented by Vikingo and Kenny Omega. And then on Impact Slammiversary on the same day, main evented by Alex Shelley and Nick Aldis. So a lot of good stuff on the wrestling horizon. Can't complain. There's stuff for everybody on the plates.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff, man. That Impact and AAA Day, 7/15, that's going to be a good day. Big summer. We've said it. Money in the Bank, Slammiversary, Triple Mania, SummerSlam, all in, all out. What a summer.
Absolutely. People talk about hot girl summer. Let's talk about hot tight summer for professional wrestling. It's going to be amazing. It's been one of the best wrestling summers that I can remember. And I know recency bias plays a part, but I can't remember all companies kind of functioning at level. I feel like there was a lull before SummerSlam, but now it's just like one month after the next. It's just benchmark events where you're looking forward to, and it's making time fly by because we kind of base ourselves on the wrestling calendar. I'm like, I cannot believe we've been doing this show for 6 months. It's insane.
It's crazy. Since, it started Jan 1, we started covering it. And what I love about all the healthy wrestling going on right now is growing up, I always felt like there were downtimes in WWE, usually from SummerSlam to the Rumble was kind of it was weak. It was the weak time. And then, you had Rumble kicks off Mania season and then you're heading into SummerSlam. But now I feel like whenever a company has kind of a downtime, there's another company that's got a hot time. So you're never down across the board in wrestling. Everything's got something exciting going on.
And y'all can thank AEW for that. Double or Nothing became their WrestleMania. All Out became their SummerSlam or whatever. So WWE is counter programming. And now we have every season is a main type of event for every wrestling promotion. And then you also have throw in the international stuff with Triple Mania and Wrestle Kingdom and Dominion. And like, there's enough wrestling for you to sit down and watch all day, every day, and ruin every relationship you have because you have nothing else to do but watch wrestling. But
yeah,
I'm happy to be on this ride doing this, covering on the Tavern, because I feel like it is the best time to be a wrestling podcaster. I know there's an exorbitant amount of wrestling podcasts, but I think at this point, there's not a better time to have conversation week after week. I mean, point being is this show, we are able to go over 2 hours weekly talking about wrestling news, and we could still go more. We have to limit ourselves. There's stuff I eliminate because there's stuff that we could talk about, but it's just
100%.
Like, come on.
Yeah. Awesome. This was case in point. We went 2 hours and 20 minutes and peeked behind the curtain prior to us going live. Me and Ace is like, yeah, this is going to be a short show. Like it never happens. We always have something to talk about. Guys,
well, it's the two of us, and you and I like to expand on our thoughts, and this is a therapy session for me about wrestling. You're the only one that will listen, Chad.
Absolutely. The feeling is mutual, brother. I mean, we are, if you threw young Anthony on this channel, we'd probably go 4 hours. It's 100%. All the long-winded tavern boys, but guys,
all we have is our voice, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like if we didn't have our expanded thoughts, what would we be? We'd just be like, it was good. It was all right. It was awesome.
Right. I gotta dig deep. I gotta pick your brain and pontificate. It's what we do.
100%. But before we say goodbye to you guys, obviously we thank you for giving us the time of your day on a Monday night or a Tuesday morning, however you're listening to this, getting ready for the wrestling week. What's going on the Tavern side? Debate, Broken VCR, Flagship. I know that Sneed's going to be out this week, right?
Yeah, Flagship. It'll be me and Hawk holding down the fort. Sneed is on vacation. Debate. We do not have a debate episode this week. We went 135 straight episodes. Taking a little bit of a break right now to reconfigure some things. No worries. It's not going anywhere. It will be there. it's one of our favorite shows. We love the debate, but 135 straight weeks, going to take a little bit of a break. And Broken VCR tomorrow, as you're listening to this or watching this, we are covering Stand By Me, classic Rob Reiner film based on a Stephen King short story. We get into that. And Thursday, like always, flagship Apple and Spotify. Please give us some love. theturnbuckletavern.com. Follow on Apple and Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. We have so many shows that are worth your time. Check us out.
Absolutely. On my end, on Friday, 7 p.m., we're going to be on the tail end of Shot Nostalgia, WWF 1998, which is the end of season 3. We have next week, or this Friday, I should say, covering Rock Bottom 1998, Buried Alive match between Taker and Austin, and one of the worst matches in Austin's career because he's fighting through this gastroenteritis infection that he can't even bend over. And we'll talk about that at length. And Taker had a broken foot too, so it was just an absolute mess of a match. We'll talk about the newsletter, stuff going on the WCW side. And then the finale, believe it or not, we have the week prior. And I was going to combine them into one episode because there's only 2 Raws to cover. This is the last pay-per-view we're covering this week. But by the time you're listening to this, we're going to have all the stuff laid out for schedule-wise for season 4. Colton is going to be joining the team for the next 7 episodes, and he's going to be hopefully able to kind of provide some relief on the weeks that I have to be solo dolo, which I do enjoy. I know that I got some good feedback for the last episode, good conversation, but it's always better when you have someone to bounce off of. And hopefully, ideally, we would have the 3-man team, which would be amazing. The 3 of us with the dynamic, the Chicago flair, the Long Island flair, and of course, the Kentucky Waterfall himself, giving his perspective of Smoky Mountain Wrestling 1994. But you might see some different combinations. Maybe I'll miss a week, but it's been 61 weeks in a row I've been doing Shot Nostalgia, giving you guys that flair for the thing on a Friday to start your weekend. So I appreciate it. We've done WCW 1996, ECW 1995, WWF 1998, and now we're moving into SMW 1994, which is going to be an abbreviated season. Stick with us. I think it's going to be a really fun season, and I'm looking forward to it. So also Thursdays with Colton, my boy, at Mullet.mania, crushing it. The dude's doing awesome. I can't wait to hear his take on AEW Collision. And this just shows you, call into the tavern. We don't know what kind of talent we're going to find. This dude called the tavern. Right. He made us all pop. And to me, he's one of the best podcasters we have now.
I agree, man. He called in, he left us a message. He said, hey, if you ever need a debate guest, reach out. We reached out, and we've one of our favorites now. Like, Colton's amazing. Glad he's in the tavern. Can't wait to see Smoky Mountain Wrestling for 7 weeks. There's a part of me that wants more, but I like the abbreviated season. You guys are going to be able to pack a lot of punch, and it's fun to see a 3-man team. I think you, Mike, and Colton will crush it, and it gives you a little wiggle room if somebody needs to take a week off. You got somebody. I think 100%. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to find. The reason I've been going solo for some of them, it's because if you need a replacement, it's hard to ask someone to tag in unless they've consumed the product. Because I'm watching the Raws, watching the pay-per-views, pouring through the newsletter. It's hard unless someone knows weeks in advance to be a part of it. We've seen some guests. You've been a part of season 1 of Shot Nostalgia. We had Matt from Extra Cooler.
Yep.
I think I had Nick the Comic Nerd on WCW 96 as well. But usually it's stuff you have to be kind of tapped into. It's hard to just jump in cold and know your stuff. So we'll see as far as I already planned out episode 1 of season 4. So much stuff to break down. Newsletter is not as fruitful as obviously you do expect. It's going to be similar to ECW in a lot of ways, where ECW was driven on the content, more conversation about seeing some of the names pop up, hypotheticals about just what we think aesthetically of just the inside of a high school gym in Tennessee, what it looks like for us, and just historical value of what they were doing as far as content and storylines. Looking forward to it. And it's going to be a different flair on the season. I just can't wait to get into it. First episode will be July 7th, that Friday.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Well, that's all I got. I appreciate the support. Follow me at Acefield Retro. Also follow at Remarkable_Wrestling for the latest updates and events. We have Space of the Place July 8th coming up, headlined by Gabriel Sky, Desmond Cole. We just announced Kono Kapuchia versus Nikolai White. So some good stuff on the horizon. And Andy Brown versus Tristan Ty for the Ride Championship. If you're going to come out in person, come say hi to me. I'll give you some tavern stickers or whatever. I'm always loaded with whatever. I got my fanny pack with all my gimmicks on me. So.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, appreciate all the support. We'll be back next Monday, as always. Again, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, that's the place to stay in touch with all the Tavern Boys, all the shows, everybody. Also give some love out to our Pod Foundation family, Chick Foley, Coming Down the Aisle, and Extra Cooler. Great shows over there. But yeah, until next Monday, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck and good speed.
Reach for the sky, boy.